Saldoria stood as an island nation once known as Japan. In ancient times, monsters did not exist at all. Then, in a single instant, they were born and began to multiply rapidly. As a result, nearly 80% of the world became uninhabitable for humans due to the extreme danger. At the same time the monsters appeared, the world granted humans classes. These classes were assigned at birth, and people relied on them to shape their lives. There were fighters, warriors, priests, thieves, merchants, hunters, and shamans. Those who possessed 8 of these classes were regarded as talented. Beyond them existed 3 special classes, known as the chosen ones: the king, the sage, and the hero. Lastly, there were those most commonly assigned, the powerless individuals, such as people working in town development or in hotels. A man stood in front of a monster, attempting to hold his ground as he tried to keep it at bay. Behind him, a young boy remained slumped on the ground. Both of them belonged to the weakest class. Nearby, a young man held a rock in his hand, quietly acknowledging what he understood before flicking the stone toward the monster. The rock pierced straight through it, defeating the creature instantly. The man and the child were left in shock at what they had just witnessed. Neither of them could speak as they watched the monster burst apart. They were father and son. The young man approached them, asking if they were all right while collecting the coins left behind by the defeated monster. The father could not respond, his mouth left open in disbelief. The young man calmly gathered the coins and placed them into a bag, remarking that they appeared to be fine. The father, a level 1 villager, looked at the young man and tried to understand if he had saved them and how it was done. The son, also a level 1 villager, the young man simply stated that he had flicked a rock at the monster and expressed his thanks for what they had shown him. The 2 villagers reacted at the same time, both questioning the idea of a rock. The young man tossed the bag of coins toward the boy, shifting the focus as he handed it over. The boy's eyes widened in disbelief as he saw the bag filled with coins. The father looked at it with hesitation, unsure of what it meant. The young man leaned down and indicated that the slime had dropped it, 100 bronze, now belonging to them. He turned his attention to the boy, pointing out that defeating a slime earned 100 bronze, presenting it as something impressive. The boy quickly shook his head from side to side, which caught the young man off guard. The young man pressed further, suggesting that such an amount could be used to buy sweets and toys. The boy's expression remained downcast, as he made it clear that a villager could not defeat a green slime. The young man looked at him with a quiet sense of understanding, acknowledging it as unfortunate. He then decided he would return to town, turning his back on them. The boy called out to him, wanting to know who he was, and wondered if he might be some kind of hero. The young man only glanced back before dismissing the idea, revealing his system window instead. The sight left both father and son stunned. His name was Kagami, a villager at level 999. The 2 villagers reacted in disbelief at the revelation of a level 999 villager, knowing that villagers were considered the weakest class. Meanwhile, Kagami simply thought to himself that he would have meat for lunch. The free city of Valman came into view as Kuji walked through the village, taking a bite of his meat. From within the crowd, a voice suddenly rose, questioning why monsters had to remain, why they clung to the strong in order to survive, and why young children were forced to carry swords in their hands. The one raising his voice was a young man standing atop a platform. He continued, insisting that the situation existed because of monsters, describing them as servants of demons, and stating that peace would never come unless the demon king was defeated. Kuji observed the scene from a distance, finding the noise excessive and the situation bothersome. Nearby, a man casually remarked about the presence of a hero party, drawing Kuji's attention toward them. Another man wondered if he might be able to join as well, and the 2 began walking away. The bald man dismissed the idea, pointing out that he was only a villager. His companion countered the thought, noting that with high enough levels, even villagers could become quite strong. He then questioned whether it was possible to raise his own level. Kuji quietly agreed with that line of thinking, recognizing it as the common belief held by most people. Inside the ancient caves, a blue devil lunged toward Kuji in an attempt to attack. He clenched his fist, locking onto his target, before driving a powerful punch straight into the demon. The moment it was defeated, the creature transformed into coins. Kuji noted to himself that there seemed to be an unusual number of monsters that day. As he crouched down to gather the scattered coins, he wondered if there might be a spawn block nearby. It would be better to find it before it was destroyed and take advantage of it for continuous monster hunting. Even so, the monsters would likely just respawn anyway. Because of that, he could continue clearing all these quests without issue. He glanced at a piece of paper in his hand, checking his progress as he considered how many remained. Then his attention shifted toward a nearby cave. He immediately started running toward it, thinking there might be more monsters waiting inside. Just before entering, he abruptly stopped and pressed himself against the wall, hiding from view. Inside, he spotted a hero fighting alongside his party as they defeated a monster together. Watching from concealment, Kuji felt a quiet sense of annoyance, recognizing the blue devil as his target. He questioned why heroes were even in a place like this, believing they should be occupied with conquering demon castles instead. A mage in the group praised their success, while the hero, Rex, raised his sword and pushed the party forward toward their objective, taking advantage of their current condition. Kuji turned away and began to run off, brushing it aside as something that did not concern him. He briefly wondered what their goal even was, only to dismiss the thought entirely. To him, they were simply interfering, taking down the blue devils he had intended to deal with. Midway through his retreat, he suddenly came to a halt, his eyes widening as something unexpected caught his attention. In the distance, Kuji spotted 3 monsters gathered together, immediately recognizing it as a cluster. As the blue devils were defeated, they turned into coins, with one of them dropping a rare item, the blue devil's horn. It was an item that could completely negate all hostility directed at its user by monsters, as long as it still held magical energy. Kuji glanced at the paper in his hand, a smug sense of satisfaction forming as he considered the situation. The day had been unusually fortunate, with an increased number of rare monsters appearing. Though it felt strange, he had already encountered several of them. Only 3 blue devils remained for the quest, meaning he would likely finish earlier than expected. His thoughts drifted to food, imagining rich and appetizing sushi, causing him to drool slightly in anticipation. He settled on the idea that he would be having sushi that night. It would not be from a sushi train, but it would still be sushi. While lost in that thought, he noticed the sound of someone approaching from behind. Turning around, he saw a girl wearing a coat. The sight made him question why she was in such a place and where she was headed. Observing her movement, he realized she was walking toward a group of monsters. He moved toward her and called out, trying to stop her, but she did not respond. He raised his voice, urging her to listen and come toward him, warning her about the monsters ahead. Despite that, the girl continued forward, passing right by the demons, which only looked at her without reacting. Kuji was left stunned. He turned his attention to the demons, wondering if they were somehow asleep. He began to approach them, but the moment he drew closer, one of the demons reacted immediately. He struck the demon without hesitation, confirming his suspicion. As his attack landed, it became clear that the monsters responded to him, but not to the girl. Once the monsters were defeated, he shifted his gaze toward the end of the tunnel, considering whether he should go after her. 5 minutes later, Kuji moved quickly through the area, searching for the little girl, realizing that he had already lost track of her. After some time, the path ahead began to brighten, suggesting the presence of an exit. Before he could reach the end of the tunnel, 2 demons appeared and blocked his way. Without hesitation, he engaged them, noting to himself that there were far too many monsters around. He defeated them one after the other, clearing the path forward. Just as the final demon fell, a sharp sound reached him, a scream. It sounded like a child. Kuji immediately rushed toward the end of the tunnel, trying to confirm if it was the same girl he had seen earlier. At the exit, Rex stood before the young girl, advancing toward her with a threatening presence. The girl remained frozen in place, fear evident in her small frame. Rex asserted control over the area, treating it as territory belonging to the royal family, and questioned her presence there. The girl, trembling, wiped away her tears as she reached out for her father, but Rex moved to strike her with lethal force. Before the attack could land, Kuji stepped in and intercepted it, placing himself between them and shielding the girl behind him. The impact of the clash stirred the air, sending up a cloud of smoke. Kuji turned his head toward the little girl, who remained bewildered, a faint smirk forming on his face. Behind him, the hero party stood in shock at what had just taken place. As the smoke gradually cleared, Kuji shifted his gaze toward them, questioning their actions of surrounding a small child. Rex fixed him with a sharp glare, demanding to know what he was. He pressed further, insisting that Kuji reveal his status. In response, Kuji displayed his system window, presenting himself as nothing more than a passing villager. Rex reacted with anger, rejecting the claim outright. It made no sense that someone like Kuji could withstand such an attack and remain unharmed. However, upon seeing the displayed status, Rex's reaction shifted into disbelief. The idea that a villager had defended against that strike was something he could not easily accept. A female member of the hero party stepped forward, setting aside Kuji's class for the moment. Her attention moved to the little girl, specifically to the horns on her head. She pointed out the obvious, identifying the girl as a demon. The little girl instinctively raised her hands to her head, only then realizing that her hood had fallen back due to the force of the earlier impact. Kuji remained silent for a brief moment as he stood beside her, then acknowledged the truth of the observation. Another member of the hero party questioned his intentions, pressing him on whether he still meant to protect her despite knowing what she was, and trying to understand what he was attempting to do. Some time earlier, within the ancient caverns, the hero party engaged in battle against the blue demons. Palna, a level 78 magician, praised Rex for his performance. Rex, a level 90 hero, responded with confidence, carrying himself with the pride expected of his title. Tina, a level 50 priest, observed the surroundings and noted the unusually high number of monsters in the area. Palna then turned her attention toward another member of the group, checking on Oheim's condition. Nearby, Kuru, a level 42 sage, struggled to catch her breath, quietly objecting to being addressed that way. Palna cautioned her not to overexert herself, but Kururu insisted she was not pushing herself too far. She remained driven by a long-held wish to one day free humanity from the oppression of the Demon King. In the distant past, the world had once been made up of more than 196 different countries. However, with the rise of demons and monsters, only 3 countries remained. Tina, carrying a bag, reflected on how the number of environments suitable for human life had drastically declined. Kururu, still breathing heavily, agreed and continued the thought, recognizing that under the Demon King's command, monsters had taken over their lands. She remained determined that those lands had to be reclaimed for the sake of peace and prosperity. Palna remarked on Kururu's dedication, again referring to her with the same title, prompting Kururu to plead for her to stop. She identified herself properly as Kanazuki Kuru of Hezekiah. Palna dismissed the length of the name and casually shortened it to Kuwu, which startled Kururu. In the background, Tina asserted her own name in response. Palna then turned toward Rex, asking what he had been doing. Rex had been feeling along the cave walls, and upon finding something, it began to emit a faint glow. He informed the group that the cavern extended even deeper. Palna looked ahead and considered that the object meant to aid them in their quest might lie beyond that point. She then questioned Rex about what awaited them further inside. Rex confidently revealed what he knew, drawing from legends passed down through the royal family. According to those accounts, a holy sword rested within these caves, a weapon that could only be wielded by a hero of level 90 or higher. Palna questioned how he had come to know such information. Rex explained with clear self-assurance that Kururu was the princess of the country, and for the sake of his daughter, the king had willingly shared this knowledge with him. With that, Rex declared that their goal was now within reach. The child Kuji had been searching for finally reached the end of the tunnel. As she looked around for something, she quickly realized it was no longer there, causing her to slump down to the ground in disbelief. The realization struck her hard as she struggled to accept it, unable to understand why it was gone. While staring at the platform, a voice suddenly called out. The little girl turned toward it and saw Rex standing there. He questioned her presence, while Kururu, sensing something unusual, recognized the magical energy surrounding the girl. She immediately identified her as a demon. The girl rose to her feet, facing them with visible anger. Rex repeated the realization, then shifted his gaze to the platform and understood that the holy sword was missing. Turning back to the girl, he placed the blame on her. Fear appeared in the girl's eyes as she tried to respond, but she was cut off before she could explain. Rex, filled with disdain, asserted that the place belonged to the royal family. He drew his sword and prepared to strike. Kururu attempted to stop him, urging him to calm himself, but he did not listen. He rushed forward, convinced that her presence there had intent, and unleashed a magic attack toward her. The girl cried out in fear as the attack closed in, but before it could reach her, Kuji stepped in front of her and blocked it. He stood firmly between her and the hero party, confronting them for surrounding a child. The impact of the blocked attack produced a loud burst, sending smoke into the air. Rex turned his anger toward Kuji, demanding to know what he was. Kuji casually scratched the back of his head, presenting himself as nothing more than a passing villager. Rex rejected the claim and insisted on seeing his status, unable to believe that a villager could withstand such an attack. Before he could finish his thought, Kuji revealed his status. It clearly identified him as a villager. The little girl stared in shock, her mouth slightly open, while the rest of the hero party shared the same stunned reaction. Rex faltered at the sight, struggling to process it. Kuru, also shaken, pointed out that despite everything, Kuji had taken the attack without any harm, something she could hardly accept. Her attention then returned to the girl's horns, reinforcing the fact that the child was a demon. Even so, Kuji had knowingly chosen to protect her. The little girl shrank back in fear as Kururu pressed him, demanding to understand what he was trying to do. Kuji closed his eyes for a brief moment, searching for a way to explain the situation. Then he placed a hand on the little girl's shoulder, startling her, and presented her as not being a demon, but his younger sister. Palna and Tina looked at him with clear disbelief. Tina pointed out the horns on the girl's head, emphasizing that she had been born with them. Kuji continued trying to cover it up, awkwardly brushing it off before claiming they were simply accessories, something he had made himself, attaching directly to the head. His explanation faltered slightly before he firmly settled on it. His words only made Tina and Palna stare at him in growing shock. Kuji quickly doubled down, insisting on his claim. To prove it, he pulled out a blue devil's horn from his coat and presented it to them. Palna recognized it as the horn of a blue devil, acknowledging that it could explain the presence of magical energy. Before she could continue, Kuji demonstrated his point. With force, he pressed the horn into a concrete slab. The act left the entire hero party staring in stunned disbelief. Rex, in particular, was shaken as he realized that the slab was the very throne that had sealed the holy sword. It was not something that could be damaged so easily through sheer force. Kuji casually sat on the slab with a satisfied look, as if the matter had been settled. Kururu remained visibly shocked, while Kuji brushed off his hands and treated the act as something simple. Kururu questioned the explanation in her mind, recognizing how poorly constructed it was and doubting that it could truly convince anyone. In the background, Kuji added that such a thing should not be attempted casually. Despite this, Kururu's expression softened slightly. She found the situation unexpectedly amusing and let out a small laugh, which drew a confused look from Rex. She then accepted the explanation for what it was, deciding not to pursue the matter any further. Kuji inwardly acknowledged his success, satisfied that his attempt at deception had worked. Kururu smiled at him, signaling that they would leave the matter as it was. However, Rex did not let it go. His attention shifted back to the missing holy sword, insisting that it was a separate issue altogether. He then directed his focus toward the girl, pressing the question of what she had been doing in that room. Rex stared at the empty concrete where the holy sword had once been placed, reinforcing his suspicion. From his perspective, the girl had appeared at the exact moment the sword went missing, making it impossible to accept it as mere coincidence. Kuji, however, regarded it differently, maintaining that it truly was nothing more than coincidence. He showed little concern over the matter, even questioning what was so important about the holy sword in the first place. Rex responded by asserting his own identity, presenting himself as a hero, a chosen human. In his view, there was only one person worthy of wielding the holy sword. Kuji looked at him without much reaction at first, then seemed to recall something. Scratching the back of his head, he admitted that the situation might be his responsibility. If the discussion was about the sword, he had already found it earlier and sold it. The entire hero party froze in shock, their disbelief immediate and shared. Rex reacted strongly, unable to accept what he had just heard. Kuji, appearing uncertain, showed confusion over the significance being placed on the weapon. Rex firmly rejected the claim, holding to the belief that due to the ancient power within it, only a hero could wield the sword. To him, it was impossible for a mere villager to even lift it. Kuji acknowledged that the sword had indeed been heavy. However, he clarified that he had not lifted the sword itself, but rather the large stone seat it rested on. He then moved toward the concrete slab where he had previously embedded the blue devil's horn, intending to demonstrate his point. Doubt spread among the hero party, unable to accept what they were about to see. Kuji placed his hands on the slab and lifted it with ease, raising the entire structure above his head as if it required little effort. He presented it plainly, showing that it was possible. Rex could only watch in disbelief, his reaction deepening as he recalled Kuji's level. Kuji then calmly returned the slab to its original place. Rex could not reconcile what he had witnessed. In principle, increasing one's level required defeating monsters stronger than oneself. From his knowledge, villagers rarely surpassed level 30, and it was generally considered pointless for them to even attempt to grow stronger by entering dangerous battlefields. There was no real reason for someone to take such a great risk by trying to go beyond the limits of their assigned class. Rex stepped forward and raised his voice, declaring that the highest level ever recorded belonged to a legendary hero who had reached level 253. From his perspective, it made no sense that a mere villager could surpass such a height. He demanded an explanation, his expression filled with frustration. Kuji met him with an indifferent look, offering a simple reason, that he had been fighting monsters every single day. Rex reacted immediately, rejecting the answer. He insisted that he had done the same, pushing himself through countless battles. By his own account, he had defeated more monsters than anyone else, even dedicating himself to constant training. Before he could continue, Kuji cut through his words, pointing out that defeating monsters might be the only similarity between them. Kuji's expression hardened as he looked directly at Rex, and his restraint broke. He told him to stop, dismissing the argument altogether. In his view, it did not matter. That was simply how things were, and it was something to accept. Without lingering any longer, he reached for Alice's hand and began to leave. Rex called out to stop him, unable to let it end there. If Kuji truly possessed that level of strength, then there had to be a reason for it. Rex assumed that someone like him would aim to defeat the Demon King. Kuji turned back slightly and dismissed the idea, making it clear that he was only living an ordinary life and earning a living. To him, dealing with the Demon King was something better left to heroes. Rex was left stunned by that answer, struggling to understand it. The reasoning felt insufficient, almost unbelievable. Kuji responded calmly, suggesting that Rex still did not understand how the world truly worked. Rex's confusion deepened as he stared at him, trying to grasp what he meant. Kuji looked back at him, his eyes carrying a quiet, heavy sadness. Rex was left unsettled, unable to make sense of Kuji's attitude as he questioned what was wrong with him. As Kuji began to walk away, Kururu called out, causing him to pause. She brought up the matter of the holy sword, stating that it was the property of the royal family. Before she could continue, Kuji quickly interrupted, apologizing and asking for the matter to be overlooked. At the same time, Alice quietly questioned why such an item had been placed inside a dungeon. Kururu shifted her approach and invited Kuji to join their party and assist in defeating the Demon King. At that moment, Alice directed a sharp glare toward her. Kuji pointed to himself in mild surprise before waving the idea off, declining the offer. Kururu pressed further, asking for his reason. With the strength he possessed, it seemed clear that he could achieve things no one else had managed. Kuji responded without hesitation, denying the idea entirely. His tone carried a cold edge, and a sudden chill seemed to pass through the space, pushing the air around them. Turning away again, he asked if returning the holy sword would settle the issue. He offered to help them search for it, asking them to let the matter go after that. Kururu refused to give up. She questioned whether he had no desire for fame or fortune, and whether he felt nothing for the many people suffering across the world. Kuji looked back and admitted that wealth had its appeal, but fame held no value to him. As for those suffering, he acknowledged that he would help if he could. Kururu took that as reason enough, insisting that it should be motivation to fight. Yet even that did not move him. She then went further, declaring that once the Demon King was defeated, she would become his wife. Rex immediately reacted, taken aback by the sudden statement. Kuji's eyes widened briefly at the declaration before a small smile formed. In his thoughts, he recognized that her concern for others outweighed her concern for herself. Even so, Kuji maintained his decision and refused. Kururu pressed him again, urging him to explain his reasoning. Kuji answered plainly, stating that he did not see defeating the Demon King as anything particularly remarkable. Because of that, he had no intention of fighting or assisting them. That was simply how he felt, and he suggested they not dwell on it too much. Beside him, Alice held his hand, a faint smile appearing on her face. Kuji added that, even so, their way of thinking was not necessarily wrong. His words left the hero party confused. Palna admitted she could not understand and asked him to clarify. Kuji responded that it would be meaningless unless she came to the realization on her own, suggesting it would be better to forget he had said anything at all. Tina insisted that he at least offer a hint. Kuji gave a small answer, referring back to Kururu's earlier words about people suffering. He questioned whether they truly believed him to be that selfish. With that, he turned and walked away with Alice, leaving Kururu standing there in confusion. One of the party members noted that they had already left. Rex lowered his posture slightly, recalling that Kuji had said he still did not understand how the world worked. The thought lingered as he questioned what kind of person Kuji truly was. Then, with renewed determination, he resolved to grow stronger than that villager. Meanwhile, Kuji and Alice finally exited the cave. Kuji let out a tired sigh and noticed that night had already fallen. A sudden sneeze escaped him as the cold set in, prompting him to think it was time to head home. He then noticed Alice staring at him and questioned it. She hesitated for a moment before declaring that he was the person she had been searching for. Kuji pointed to himself in confusion. Alice struggled to gather her words, trying to ask properly before finally finding the resolve to request that he marry her. Kuji stepped back in surprise. In his thoughts, he struggled to process the sudden proposal, questioning who the girl truly was. Back when Kuji was still a child, a voice called out for him to return, stopping him in his tracks. It was his father, visibly upset, questioning whether he had once again been going out to fight monsters. His father reminded him that he was a villager and should behave accordingly, telling him to focus on work instead. Beside him, his mother watched with concern, her eyes filled with worry as she looked at Kuji. Kuji turned toward them and brushed off their concerns, insisting that everything was fine. He explained that he could throw rocks from a distance, making it safe enough not to worry. He held up a small stone in his hand, adding that his level had even increased. At that time, he had only reached level 3. His father questioned how a villager could possibly raise their level at all. But Kuji did not stay to answer. He had already begun running off, determined not to stop. As he moved, he held firmly to his belief that defeating monsters was far more profitable than any job available to villagers. Villagers were not meant to fight monsters. Their roles were meant to remain within ordinary occupations such as tailoring, farming, baking, labor, and other similar work. Kagami Kuji had started defeating monsters when he was still just a boy. It had been nothing more than luck that allowed him to do so, something he did not fully understand at the time. Now, he could be seen throwing a rock at a slime, defeating it with ease. When monsters were defeated, they dropped money. The income gained from such battles far exceeded the small earnings of a villager. Kagami became captivated by the appeal of that wealth. At the same time, a small sense of doubt quietly formed within him. He found himself questioning, without directing it at anyone in particular, why monsters would drop money at all. Back in the present, outside the cave, Alice told Kuji that he was the person she had been searching for, then directly asked him to marry her. The sudden request made Kuji's eyes widen in shock as he reacted in confusion. He turned away from her, unable to understand what she was talking about. Kuji then questioned what a demon like her would even want with a holy sword. Alice hesitated before mentioning her father, causing Kuji to turn back toward her. The word lingered in his mind, bringing up the image of his own father lying lifeless in a pool of blood. He pressed a hand against his face while Alice looked at him with a quiet sadness. She explained that her father had fallen ill, and that she had heard rumors of a new hero beginning a journey. If that hero were to obtain the holy sword, she feared it would lead to her father being killed. Kuji looked at her and considered the situation, questioning whether a hero could defeat her father with the holy sword, in the same way one would face the Demon King. Alice hesitated again, uncertain in how to describe it, before admitting that her father was not just like the Demon King, but in fact was the Demon King himself. The realization struck Kuji immediately, leaving him visibly shaken. Alice quickly tried to apologize, explaining that she had not intended to hide the truth. Before she could finish, Kuji interrupted, surprised at the idea that the Demon King even had a daughter. Alice stared at him in shock, questioning whether he already knew about her father, and whether that was why he had shown no interest in defeating him. Kuji dismissed the thought, explaining that it was only a matter of time before the Demon King would be taken down regardless. Alice's expression grew more worried as she asked for his help, hoping he would agree. She questioned whether it was because monsters were born from the horns of demons. Kuji acknowledged that he was aware of how demon horns worked, but he questioned her reasoning. He pointed out that being born a demon did not automatically make it their fault, and that she herself was not so different from a human. Alice acknowledged his point, yet held on to her belief. That was exactly why she wanted to find out whether demons and humans could live together in peace. If such a thing were possible, then there had to be a way forward. Kuji looked at her, quietly regarding her as a child in his thoughts, understanding how she had arrived at such an idea, even to the point of proposing marriage. He then gave his answer plainly, apologizing before stating it directly. To him, it was impossible. Alice reacted with visible frustration, clenching her teeth. Kuji continued, explaining that even if demons themselves did nothing, the monsters would still attack humans. Because of that, humans would continue to hate demons. In turn, demons who suffered from those attacks would come to resent humans as well. Alice tried to argue against it, but Kuji stopped her and added that, even putting aside the fact that monsters came from demons, there were many people who already understood that demons were not truly different from humans. Alice stared at him in shock, unable to accept that idea. Silence settled between them for a moment before Kuji concluded that, in the end, that was simply how the world worked. A distorted and unbalanced system. Alice looked at him with unease, questioning what lay behind the expression he carried and wondering what he truly understood. She then asked why, if that was the case, he had no desire to kill demons. Kuji paused to think, then turned his back to her once again and gave a simple answer, describing himself as a fool. Alice watched his back as he walked away, repeating that word in her mind, unable to understand why he would think of himself that way or what he truly meant. After a moment, she took a step forward, her expression firming with resolve as she began to run after him. At the outer wall of Valman, Kuji let out a tired sigh, relieved to have finally arrived. He then glanced behind him, questioning how long she intended to keep following him. Nearby, Alice hid behind a tree, cautiously peeking out as she explained that this was the only town where she could buy the medicine her father needed. Kuji considered her situation and wondered if she had come to purchase it, then questioned whether she even had the money for it. Alice bit her cheek as tears began to gather in her eyes, giving him his answer without words. Kuji awkwardly accepted the situation for what it was. He then called her attention and she looked toward him. Kuji asked why she did not harbor any hatred toward humans. Alice responded with simple honesty, unable to see a reason for such hatred. To her, if everything was driven by hate, then nothing would ever change. Her words made Kuji pause, taken aback by the sincerity of her thinking. Alice continued, expressing her belief that humans and demons were equals. That statement left Kuji even more stunned. He looked at her as she stood there, her expression straightforward and unguarded. In his mind, the idea echoed, equals. It was something he had never once heard from a demon before. For a moment, he simply stood there, looking at her, before suddenly breaking into laughter. Alice looked at him in confusion, unsure of what had caused that reaction. Kuji wiped the tears from his eyes, finding her perspective unexpectedly refreshing. Alice, still smiling, regarded him in return, seeing him as an unusual kind of human. She recalled that her father had always believed that such a possibility existed somewhere. Kuji quieted after that, his expression settling as he considered her words. He admitted to himself that, in reality, he was still part of a very small minority. Even so, Alice held firm to her resolve, refusing to give up on her belief. Kuji quietly reflected that for a demon child to have come this far from home, sending her back to the castle alone would be too dangerous. He considered it briefly, deciding that helping her for a short while would not be a problem. Kuji paused for a moment, then stretched his body and brushed the matter aside, deciding that he had time to spare anyway. Alice looked at him, confused by the sudden shift in his attitude. He then motioned for her to come closer and reached out, taking hold of her hair. Alice reacted with unease, unsure of what he was about to do. Kuji calmly stated his intention to buy the medicine. The statement caught Alice off guard, and her surprise only grew when he added that she would be coming along with him. Startled, Alice tried to cover her horns, convinced it was impossible. Her demonic aura would immediately expose her presence. However, the moment her hands touched them, she froze in disbelief. Kuji looked at her with a steady gaze, dismissing the idea of any noticeable demonic aura. Panicked, Alice rushed toward him, overwhelmed by confusion as she tried to understand what had just happened. Kuji opened his arms slightly, prepared to steady her if she lost her balance. He explained that he had simply placed something over her horns. While searching for monsters in the past, he had come across something extremely rare. Spawn blocks, which produced endless waves of monsters, were troublesome by nature. By chance, he had destroyed one and obtained a mysterious high-ranking material. That material possessed the ability to alter a demon's nature. Using it, he had crafted an S-ranked item, something simple in form, yet extraordinary in effect, referred to as a piece of cloth. Alice reacted with clear excitement, overwhelmed by what she had just learned. The idea amazed her, and she wondered if such an item could be made for all demons. Kuji dismissed the possibility, reminding her that it had been crafted from an extremely rare, almost miraculous material. Turning away with a hint of satisfaction, he added that as long as she kept it on, she would be fine. He urged her to pull up her hood quickly, which she did without hesitation. Alice then called out to him, curious about what had led him to create something so specific. The item seemed perfectly suited for concealing a demon's horns. Kuji scratched his head, giving a vague explanation, suggesting that in some way, the two of them were not so different. Alice considered that idea, wondering if it applied to him as well, but Kuji brushed the topic aside, urging her not to dwell on it. Alice trembled with excitement, unable to contain her admiration for what he had done. Kuji turned back toward her and pointed out that she had yet to tell him her name. She introduced herself as Alice Balnesio. In return, he gave his name as Kagami Kuji. After a short while, Kuji suddenly noticed his hunger and suggested they get moving. He called out to Alice as he started forward. Alice smiled as she followed, expressing her willingness to get along with him. Within the town of Valman, Alice stood among the busy crowd, gripping her hood tightly. She reminded herself that she was in a human town, surrounded entirely by humans. Fear crept in as she considered what would happen if her identity were discovered. Before her thoughts could spiral further, Kuji handed her something and urged her to try it. The two of them sat down while quietly observing the people around them. Alice tasted the ice cream and reacted with clear delight, finding it incredibly good. Kuji watched her with a gentle expression, already knowing her reaction. To him, it was usually something eaten after a proper meal, but he treated the moment as something special. A man nearby noticed Alice and approached, observing how much she seemed to enjoy the treat. He offered her something else to try. Alice looked at him with excitement, clearly eager. Soon after, another person asked if it was her first time in Valman and handed her an apple. Someone else added a slice of pizza, encouraging her to try it, followed by another who gave her a burger as well. Overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness, Alice brought her hands close to her mouth, unsure how to react. Kuji watched the scene with an awkward smile. As they walked away, Kuji held his side slightly, finding the situation almost unbelievable. He looked at Alice, now carrying a bag filled with different kinds of food, and felt a quiet sense of confirmation. Just as he had thought, she would begin to understand humans once she experienced them herself. Kuji then lifted his gaze toward the sky, thinking of his father and holding on to the idea that he would one day make him proud. At the same time, high above Valman, a group of massive bird-like monsters hovered in the sky. Standing atop one of them was a man who looked down upon the city with a dark presence, carrying an intent that suggested fear would soon follow. Alice had just begun to grasp a sense of hope. However, something was already approaching that would soon threaten to break it. While Kagami and Alice moved through the city, Kagami considered their next step, deciding they should find an inn for the night. Alice reacted with surprise at the idea. Even though she understood that it might not be the right time for such comfort, the thought of sleeping in a real bed felt almost like a dream to her. At the inn, Alice immediately leapt onto the bed, overwhelmed with happiness at the simple comfort. Kagami reminded himself that he needed to make sure she returned home safely, but for the moment, he planned to go out and buy the medicine. He also intended to find a friend who could accompany them on their journey. Alice looked at him, surprised that he would not be the only one with her. Kagami made it clear that while he was capable of handling fights on his own, protecting her at the same time would require additional help. There was also the risk of attacks from adventurers, which made the situation more complicated. He gave a brief farewell and left, intending to return later. Alice watched him go, asking him in her mind to come back soon. Left alone, she reflected on the situation. She realized that she had momentarily forgotten the reality that humans and demons did not get along. The events of the day had made her lower her guard. Still, she convinced herself that someone trusted by Kagami would be safe. After some time passed, a knock sounded at the door. A voice from outside indicated that someone had returned and asked for the door to be opened. Alice reacted with surprise at how quickly he had come back. She moved toward the door and opened it without much hesitation. The door swung open, revealing a large, muscular man standing there. As he stepped inside, his presence overwhelmed the space, causing Alice to fall back. The man looked down at her, his attention fixed on her small figure. Alice could only stare up at him, her fear immediately apparent. The large, muscular man introduced himself as Takaco Builda, making it known that despite appearances, he was a fighter. Kagami reacted in a way that made it clear how obvious that fact already was. Kagami then glanced at Alice, reassuring her that there was no need to be afraid. Takaco was already aware of her being a demon and held no issue with it, so there was nothing to worry about. Alice showed surprise at that, while Takaco made it clear that he would not turn against someone like her. His expression softened as he reflected on his past. Long ago, when he had been gravely injured and on the brink of death, it had been a demon who saved him by giving him medicine. From that moment, he came to understand that humans and demons were not so different. The hatred and conflict between them began to feel meaningless. Now, he spent his days managing a modest club and bar. Hearing this, Alice lowered her gaze, her eyes growing teary as she felt regret for being afraid of him earlier. She introduced herself as Alice, expressing her hope that they could get along from that point forward. Takaco responded with an approving gesture, welcoming her warmly and showing confidence that they would get along well. Kagami then reflected on how he had first met Takaco, recalling the time he had visited his bar as a customer. Since then, the two had developed a strong connection. Alice watched as Kagami and Takaco engaged in a playful exchange, their familiarity clear. She noted how well the two of them got along. In the middle of it, Takaco struck Kagami in the stomach, leaving him doubled over. Alice reacted in shock, realizing that Takaco was also at level 999. Takaco clapped his hands together as Kagami collapsed, then shifted his attention back to Alice. He observed that she had likely been sleeping outside until now and suggested taking her to the hot springs. Alice responded with clear enthusiasm, eager at the idea. She also thought Kagami should join them. Kagami, still lying on the floor, showed no interest in going along. Instead, he handed Alice a ribbon, telling her to use it to cover her horns, and left the two of them to go together. Alice paused at that remark, confused by what he meant as she considered the situation. As they stepped out of the inn, Takaco laughed lightly, finding it surprising that Kagami seemed to dislike bathing. From her perspective, it was an unexpected trait, especially for someone like him. Alice walked beside her in silence, processing what she had just heard. In her thoughts, the idea settled in, realizing that Takaco was, in fact, a woman. The realization struck her as something she had completely misunderstood until now. From a distance, Kagami watched the two of them leave. A quiet laugh escaped him as he realized that Alice had mistaken Takaco for a man the entire time. His expression shifted slightly as he recalled Alice's earlier words about her father. That thought pulled him into a memory. Inside a carriage, a man spoke to him, emphasizing that a villager did not need to be able to fight. What mattered was fulfilling one's role properly. The expectation placed on him was clear: he should aim to become a proper tailor. As a child, Kagami held onto a different view. He believed that weaker monsters like slimes or moss goblins could be defeated from a distance by throwing rocks. However, against monsters of level 4 or higher, such methods had no effect. At that time, a warrior had intervened and saved him. The warrior's expression carried annoyance, reflecting the common belief that villagers were the weakest. Young Kagami looked up, letting out a quiet complaint, questioning the fairness of it all and wondering why people could not choose what they wanted to become. The carriage suddenly came to a halt, breaking the moment. Confusion set in as he questioned why they had stopped. He called out to his father. His father appeared at the entrance of the carriage, but behind him loomed a monster with its jaws wide open. His father's expression tightened as he urged him to run. The scene froze in his mind as the child cried out. Kagami abruptly returned to the present, his breathing uneven. He forced the thought away, insisting to himself that it was all in the past. His attention shifted when something outside the window caught his eye. He focused on it, trying to understand what he was seeing. Takaco and Alice walked together through the town. As they moved along, Takaco noticed something off about Alice and turned her attention to her. Alice's face had gone pale, her unease becoming clear. Alice's thoughts centered on Kagami's strength, questioning how he had managed to reach level 999. From what she understood, there should not even be monsters beyond level 500. The idea troubled her further, as she considered that if another human like him existed, someone like that might attempt to kill her father. Takaco noticed the worry weighing on her and reassured her in a calm manner. From her perspective, there was no one else like Kagami who had reached such a level. Alice questioned how she could be so certain. Takaco explained that Kagami lacked something important, something that all living beings should possess. To her, that absence made him the greatest fool in the world. Alice lingered on that thought, trying to understand what it meant. She wondered what kind of person Kagami truly was, what he was thinking, and how he had become so strong. The desire to know more about him grew stronger within her. She looked toward Takaco, wanting to learn everything about Kagami. Takaco considered it briefly, then decided that simply giving answers would not be meaningful. They had only just met, and understanding each other would take time. Learning naturally, through shared experiences, would be far more worthwhile. Alice lowered her gaze slightly, accepting that reasoning. She then smiled, expressing her gratitude and her determination to come to understand both of them better. Takaco watched her closely, finding her presence undeniably endearing. Without hesitation, she lifted Alice into her arms and carried her along, moving forward with energy toward the hot springs. At that moment, a sudden shout echoed through the area. Both of them turned toward the source of the noise as more voices followed, rising in alarm. Their attention shifted upward. Monsters were falling from the sky. Above the town, a figure rode atop a massive bird-like monster, looking down at the chaos below with clear intent as the attack began. Kagami stood by the window, looking out as he noticed a flock of hellcrows gathering in the sky. Outside, Takaco quickly moved to shield Alice. Alice stared upward in disbelief, unable to accept what she was seeing. The presence of the Demon King's army made no sense to her. From above, a voice echoed across the area, declaring the beginning of an attack, its intent clear as it spoke of overwhelming humans with the power of demons. Around them, the townspeople reacted immediately, shouting in anger as they prepared to fight back. Alice struggled to understand what was happening. In her mind, it could not be true. Her father would never have ordered something like this. Tears formed as she watched the demons descend and begin to ravage the city. Takaco stayed close, offering reassurance and urging her not to panic. Alice's concern remained fixed on the town, but Takaco cut through her worry, reminding her that Valman was a city filled with adventurers, and its people would not fall so easily. Behind them, someone pointed toward the sky, drawing attention to a sudden change. More monsters began to rise upward, flying into the sky instead of descending. Alice and Takaco watched as the strange sight unfolded before them. Takaco immediately recognized what it meant. Only one person would be capable of causing such a phenomenon: Kagami. Without hesitation, she lifted Alice into her arms and began to run. If they followed the source of where the monsters were gathering, they would surely find him. Kagami grabbed hold of a monster, lifted it up, and hurled it into the sky with force. The creature was sent flying upward with clear direction. Above, the demon commander shielded himself as the incoming monster nearly struck him. Looking down over the city, he tried to make sense of what was happening. The creatures were not only being thrown into the air, but they were moving with intent, as if aimed at specific targets. The thought crossed his mind that it could be the work of a hero, yet even that seemed unlikely, as such a feat felt beyond what a hero should be capable of. From below, Kagami spotted the demon commander hovering in the sky. He immediately identified him as the leader and considered that he would need to deal with him. For the moment, however, he decided it would be better to regroup with Alice and Takaco first. As he moved, he suddenly stopped and hid behind a wall, noticing a familiar presence. It was the same hero again. From his position, Kagami watched Rex prepare an attack, raising his sword with intent. The display struck Kagami as reckless, especially in a situation like this. Before Rex could complete his move, Kagami leapt in and stopped him, interrupting the action entirely. He criticized the approach, clearly frustrated by the lack of awareness. Nearby adventurers noticed the scene, recognizing Kagami and reacting in disbelief at his actions. They questioned how he was able to handle monsters so easily, lifting and throwing them without effort. Kagami ignored their reactions and threw another monster into the sky, sending it upward with force once more. Rex struggled to process what was happening, unable to understand Kagami's intentions. To him, it looked like unnecessary interference, as if Kagami was trying to show off his strength. Kururu supported that view, noting that they had already gathered their forces to launch a coordinated counterattack. Kagami observed the preparations, noticing the presence of archers, crossbow units, and even mages assembled for battle. He acknowledged that their plan was not entirely flawed, but as he turned toward Kuru, he dismissed it as overly simplistic. He lightly struck her on the head, making it clear that, in his view, she was being too naive. Kagami began by pointing out the flaws in their approach. While he acknowledged the strength behind the hero's technique, he questioned the decision to aim for an immediate kill against the demon commander without even considering capturing him for information. He then shifted his attention to Kururu's arrows, judging them as poorly executed. If they missed, the arrows would fall back into the town, causing even more damage. In his view, their lack of experience was clear. Despite that, Kagami gave a small smile, recognizing that their intentions had been good. Kururu lowered her gaze, feeling the weight of his words. She realized that he was right. Her focus had been entirely on the monsters, causing her to overlook the safety of the town. Instead of protecting the people, her actions had put them at greater risk. Palna, still trying to understand, questioned what they should do instead. She also could not grasp how Kagami was able to throw monsters so easily, especially when he was not supposed to be capable of using magic. Kagami seemed ready to respond, but before he could, Alice suddenly appeared from the side, surprised by the mention that he could not use magic. Takaco followed behind her, letting out a small breath of relief upon finding him. Kagami acknowledged their presence, noting that both of them were unharmed. Palna observed the interaction and began to question the truth behind Kagami's earlier claim. It became clear to her that Alice was not truly his younger sister, as her way of addressing him did not match that relationship. Kagami ignored the observation and shifted his focus back to Alice. His concern was directed entirely at her condition, checking whether she had been hurt. Noticing her troubled expression, he tried to lighten the moment, attempting to ease her worry. Alice looked at him with tears forming in her eyes. Kagami reassured her calmly, making it clear that everything would be handled. Kururu then stepped forward, introducing herself formally. She acknowledged Kagami's strength but expressed doubt that humanity could fully demonstrate its power without working together. Kagami dismissed the need for such cooperation. In his view, there was no reason to complicate things. The only requirement was to capture the demon commander in the sky. Kururu reacted with confusion, while Kagami continued his reasoning. The Demon King's army did not yet understand the strength they were facing, and because of that, they were unprepared. No matter how organized their attack might seem, they were still at a disadvantage. Kururu and the others fell silent, absorbing his words. Palna pointed out that the demon in the sky was on a completely different level, making the situation far more serious. In response, Kagami raised his hands, signaling for her to calm down. From his perspective, when dealing with enemies, the only real option was to defeat them. At the same time, when facing an opponent whose intentions were unclear, it was necessary to stay cautious and question anything suspicious. Rex and Tina looked at him in confusion, unable to fully grasp what he meant. Palna, however, focused on his mention of intentions, sensing that he knew more than he was openly sharing. Kagami turned his back to them, aware that Palna had begun to catch on. In his thoughts, he reflected on how the Demon King's army had never launched an attack before. Now, with the Demon King himself absent or inactive, the timing of this assault felt unnatural. He glanced toward Alice and let out a quiet sigh, wishing the situation were simple enough to resolve by directly asking the one responsible. Stretching his body, he signaled for everyone to step back. Alice looked at him, wondering what he was about to do. Kagami smirked slightly before launching himself upward into the air. The others watched in shock as he ascended, calling out to Takaco. Takaco immediately understood and leapt after him, preparing to assist. Kagami thought to himself that he only needed one more push. Takaco matched his movement, preparing for the maneuver. With a powerful motion, she flipped midair and delivered a strong kick, sending Kagami flying forward at tremendous speed. High above, the demon commander noticed the sudden approach and grew alarmed. The sight before him made little sense. First monsters moving in unnatural ways, and now a human soaring through the sky. Kagami rushed toward him at high speed, but instead of stopping he overshot his target and flew past. The demon commander found the entire situation unsettling, questioning whether this was truly a human town at all. A loud crash sounded from behind him, startling the monster he was riding. He turned and saw Kagami rising from the impact point. Kagami steadied himself, feeling the force of the landing, and reflected that the launch had sent him farther than expected. Even so, he quickly regained his composure, ready to act. With a steady stance, Kagami directed his attention toward the demon commander, pressing for an explanation of what was happening. The demon commander stared at Kagami, unable to comprehend what stood before him. Kagami presented himself plainly as nothing more than a passing villager. The response only deepened the confusion. The demon commander recognized the level immediately, finding it absurd that a villager could possess such overwhelming strength. At that level, Kagami would be capable of threatening even the Demon King himself. Kagami acknowledged the mention of the Demon King, But before anything more could be said, the demon commander reacted. His expression sharpened as he launched an attack, determined to prevent any harm from reaching his lord. The strike created a cloud of smoke that filled the air. The demon commander watched closely as it began to clear, tension rising as he searched for the outcome. As the smoke faded, Kagami remained standing. He brushed off the attack as if it had been nothing, showing no sign of damage. He then spoke calmly, easing the tension by stating that there was no need for such hostility. From his perspective, the Demon King was someone he knew, and he had no intention of harming him. The demon commander paused, thrown off by the statement. The fact that his attack had failed to eliminate Kagami unsettled him, and the claim of familiarity with the Demon King only made it harder to believe. Kagami continued, bringing up Alice and identifying her as the Demon King's daughter. He made it clear that she was currently under his care. The revelation shocked the demon commander. The fact that Kagami even knew about Alice's existence forced him to take the situation seriously. If what Kagami said was true, then he could not ignore him. He questioned where Kagami stood, trying to determine whether he was an ally or an enemy. Kagami rejected both labels, making it clear that he did not align himself with demons, nor did he consider himself on the side of humans. The demon commander narrowed his gaze, pressing him for his purpose. Kagami answered with a quiet confidence, stating that he simply had a question. The Demon King he knew was not someone who would wish for the destruction of humanity. He recalled what Alice had told him, that her father had fallen ill, and that she had traveled far in search of medicine. With that in mind, he questioned whether this attack had truly come from the Demon King's orders. The demon commander reacted strongly, unable to accept the claim about his lord's condition. He insisted that the orders were genuine and came directly from the Demon King. Kagami pressed further, questioning whether he was absolutely certain and whether those commands had truly been received directly. His gaze hardened as he spoke, and the weight of his presence began to affect the demon commander. The demon commander's thoughts began to unravel as doubt crept in. He questioned whether the order had truly come from the Demon King himself. At the time, nothing had seemed unusual. His lord had been seated on the throne, and beside him stood his trusted right hand, Lord Estellar. Then realization struck him. Lord Estellar Urgot. Memories surfaced, recalling how the command had been delivered as a royal order, instructing the attack on the town of Valman. The possibility emerged that the order had not come directly from the Demon King at all. Kagami let out a small laugh, easing the tension slightly, suggesting that it was still too early to draw conclusions. The demon commander resisted the doubt, holding on to the fact that the order had been given while standing beside the Demon King. Kagami acknowledged that point but maintained that the truth remained unclear. There was not enough information to fully understand the situation. It was possible that the one who issued the command had acted with his own intentions from the beginning. At the same time, there was also the chance that he himself was being manipulated. The idea shocked the demon commander, as the thought of someone influencing the Demon King seemed impossible. Kagami cut through the reaction, reminding him that it was only a possibility. Reacting too strongly without understanding the full picture would not help. With urgency building, the demon commander decided they needed to head to the Demon King's castle immediately. However, Kagami reached forward and grabbed hold of the Hellcrow's head, stopping its movement. The sudden action caught the demon commander off guard as he struggled to understand what Kagami was doing. The motion made it seem as though they might be forced downward into the forest. Kagami, however, remained composed. He glanced upward, noting that the remaining Hellcrows had finally gathered. The demon commander grew uneasy, unable to predict Kagami's next move. In the next moment, Kagami leapt from the Hellcrow without hesitation. He surged through the air, cutting through the sky with overwhelming force, striking down every flying creature in his path. The demon commander could only watch in disbelief, unable to fully comprehend the scale of what he was witnessing. The demon commander cried out in disbelief as an entire flock of Hellcrows was wiped out in a single motion. Kagami soon returned to his side, coins raining down from the sky around them. He casually raised a hand in greeting, treating the moment as if it were nothing more than good fortune. The demon commander could not comprehend what he was seeing. While he was consumed with concern for the Demon King, Kagami showed no urgency, behaving in a way that felt completely out of place. To him, it only reinforced the idea that Kagami was plotting something. Kagami lifted his hands, signaling for him to calm down. He pointed out that acting rashly would only make things worse. The demon commander struggled to follow, but Kagami continued, explaining that there was still a chance he had been misled. If he rushed to confirm things directly, both he and the Demon King could end up in danger. Instead, it would be safer to deal with the attacking forces first, eliminate the threat, and then return to the castle quietly. The demon commander hesitated, considering the reasoning. Kagami added another remark, mentioning that he also wanted to collect all the coins gained from defeating the Hellcrows. That statement only fueled the demon commander's frustration. He warned that the weight was becoming too much for the Hellcrow beneath them to handle, and that they would crash if it continued. In his mind, he realized the situation was spiraling out of control. Kagami, however, remained calm, revealing that this outcome had been intentional. Without hesitation, he lifted his foot and struck down the hellcrow they were riding. The sudden loss of support sent both of them falling from the sky. The demon commander panicked as they dropped rapidly, unable to understand how Kagami expected to survive such a fall. Kagami leaned back slightly, unconcerned with his own safety, noting that he would be fine, though the impact might hurt the other. Moments later, they crashed to the ground. The demon commander hit hard, groaning as pain spread through his body. When he regained awareness, Kagami was already standing nearby, watching him with a relaxed expression. He noted that the demon commander seems to have recovered. The demon commander, still shaken, regarded him as something beyond normal and struggled to believe that he had survived. Kagami responded casually, brushing off the concern before asking for his name. The demon commander identified himself as Mino, a brasher, still uncertain of Kagami's intentions. He questioned whether Kagami truly had no plan to kill him despite him being a demon. Kagami's expression tightened slightly, clearly tired of the repeated doubt, and he dismissed the question as unnecessary. Mino's eyes widened as he processed the words, caught off guard by being called foolish. Kagami continued calmly, explaining that if it ever came down to it, he would act accordingly. However, from what he had seen, Mino appeared to be a reasonable person. More importantly, he was genuinely concerned about both the Demon King and Alice, which made it difficult to see him as a bad individual. Mino insisted that he was not aligned with humans. Kagami brushed the distinction aside, viewing it as part of a larger problem. To him, the conflict itself was meaningless. If monsters did not exist, humans and demons might have been able to live together without issue. Because monsters were born from the horns of demons, humans had come to fear and seek the destruction of demons. In turn, demons reacted in the same way, leading both sides to fight out of fear. He gestured toward Mino, questioning whether that cycle of fear and conflict was not simply tragic. Mino remained silent, unable to immediately respond. Kagami let a small smile appear, deciding that the matter was settled for now. With the enemy forces already dealt with, he prepared to leave. Carrying a sack filled with the spoils from the battle, he mentioned that he would return around the following afternoon with Alice. He made it clear that Mino would be coming along as well. Mino reacted, unable to understand why someone would willingly involve themselves in such risk. As Kagami stepped closer, the sudden proximity made him tense. Kagami picked up on it and questioned whether Mino was actually concerned for him. Mino quickly denied it, though the reaction betrayed a level of disbelief at how far Kagami was willing to go. Kagami accepted the response lightly, dismissing the idea that Mino would be worried. At the same time, he expressed his own intention to check on the Demon King's condition. Mino considered it and, with some hesitation, accepted the arrangement on the condition that Alice remained safe. Kagami's expression brightened, recognizing the decision as proof of Mino's character. He believed that Alice would be pleased with the outcome. With that, he left the matter for the next day. Mino remained where he was, reflecting on everything that had just happened. The existence of a level 999 villager still felt unreal to him. Though he could not move for the moment, he was at least still alive. The idea of understanding and coexisting with humans lingered in his thoughts. It had always been dismissed as impossible, and that impossibility was the very reason both sides continued to fight. Yet the words of that foolish human stayed with him. For now, he decided he would simply observe him. A quiet thought surfaced. If such a thing were truly possible, could peace actually be achieved? Mino lowered his gaze and let out a deep breath, pushing the idea aside. It was not something he should dwell on. His concern returned to Alice, hoping that she was safe and unharmed. Meanwhile, at the Valman Inn, Kagami sat across from Alice at breakfast, letting out a tired yawn. He noticed her expression and questioned the reason behind her smile. Alice appeared cheerful as she began eating, grateful that Kagami had taken the time to speak properly with Mino. Kagami considered it casually, acknowledging that Mino seemed like a reasonable individual overall. Alice agreed with that impression, feeling reassured knowing that it had been Mino leading the attack. The thought of meeting him again brought her a sense of relief. Kagami reminded her of their situation. The hero and his party were still nearby, and since she was pretending to be human, things could become complicated quickly. Even so, he recognized that interacting with humans properly was still important. He then realized something and asked about Takaco's whereabouts. Alice explained that she had gone to check on her shop. Kagami reacted with mild amusement, finding that behavior typical of her. He then turned his thoughts toward their next step, knowing they needed to plan what to do moving forward. There were many humans around, while Mino carried a strong demonic presence. Regular methods of travel, such as horses, would not work well with demons, making them unsuitable. Alice let out a frustrated reaction, realizing that traveling on foot would take far too long, and there was no telling when they would arrive. Kagami agreed with that concern, then concluded that there was no avoiding it. However, he noted that there was still one method of transportation that could work even with demons. Alice's expression brightened at the possibility. With renewed energy, she decided that they would go with that option. Along the streets of Valman, Kagami pointed towards something in the distance, drawing Alice's attention. A group of centauros moved along, pulling a carriage as they went. One of them reacted with disdain toward humans, carrying an air of arrogance. Kagami, clearly unimpressed, explained that these creatures were known as centauros. Their pride was so extreme that they barely acknowledged humans at all. Then, with a slight smirk, he suggested she watch closely. What followed was unexpected. The centauros were struck, and instead of resisting, they reacted with strange enthusiasm. The sight was unsettling. Kagami showed clear disgust, while Alice felt uneasy just watching it unfold. Kagami described them as creatures with extreme tendencies, explaining that they willingly obeyed humans in exchange for such treatment. The behavior repulsed him, and he made it clear that he had no intention of using them as transport under any circumstance. Alice agreed immediately, disturbed by what she had seen. She admitted that she had never even known such monsters existed. She then looked at Kagami with curiosity, realizing how much knowledge he seemed to have. Kagami responded casually, explaining that before reaching level 999, he had traveled extensively, encountering many things along the way. Alice reflected on that number again. It was something she had been wondering about for some time. A villager like Kagami had managed to achieve something no hero had ever reached. She asked herself how he had been able to reach such a level. Kagami gave a simple answer, attributing it to effort. Alice quickly stopped herself from pressing further, deciding that if it was something he did not wish to share, then she would not force the question. Still, her curiosity remained. Kagami noticed her expression and reassured her, understanding that anyone would naturally wonder how he had reached such a height. Kagami wondered how he had reached level 999. When he first started saving money to live a peaceful life, his level had risen alongside it. Alice reacted with confusion, unable to follow. Kagami noticed her disappointed expression and questioned it, insisting that money was important. Alice acknowledged his point, but before she could continue, Kagami cut in. He made it clear that he did not believe money was everything, yet basic needs like food and shelter still required it. Even a powerless villager would need money to hire protection. That was why he earned it by defeating strong monsters. Alice reflected that once he realized this, that must have been when he reached his current level, even if it meant risking his life. She struggled with the idea, questioning whether money truly held that much importance. Kagami assumed she would see it that way. After all, once someone gathered both wealth and strength, it would seem natural to expect life to become easier. His gaze dropped as he recalled that time, when he had found something at the Adventurers Guild shop. Standing at the counter back then, he had wondered if he would soon be able to afford a house. As his eyes moved across the shelves, something caught his attention. It was a mysterious item, one whose contents would remain unknown until purchased, priced at 10,000 gold. Alice was shocked by the price and urged him not to buy it, questioning how much money he even had. Kagami had about 5,000 gold. To Alice, that amount already sounded enough to buy a castle. Kagami, however, dismissed that idea without interest. To him, buying such things held no meaning. He had a dream. The value of an item could not be judged by its price alone, and this uncertainty was something he chose to face willingly. Alice strongly urged him not to accept it. Kagami considered that it might be an item holding the mysteries of the world. Alice let out a quiet sigh, realizing she could not stop him. She looked at Kagami with concern, unable to tell whether he was even being serious anymore. He offered no simple explanation, and just as she had thought, it was something that could not be explained. Kagami noticed her worried expression and remarked that, in the beginning, it had all been for the sake of money. Alice acknowledged this. Kagami scratched his head and reflected that money itself was a strange thing. Alice reacted with confusion. Kagami wondered why currency dropped by monsters held such importance in human life. Alice questioned why he would even ask, since that was simply how things had always been. A voice suddenly called out to them. Both turned toward it, seeing someone who had been searching for them. Kagami smiled upon recognizing Takaco. He then pulled Alice along, deciding they would have to continue their conversation another time, as Alice needed to meet that man named Mino. Takaco approached Alice and asked if they had spoken. Alice smiled and confirmed that she would not rush him. Takaco took Alice's hand as they began to walk away, finding the situation quietly endearing. As they moved on, Alice thought about how they would continue later, and wondered how long she and Kagami would remain together. At the outskirts of Valman, Mino waited. Upon spotting her, he called out to Lady Alice. Alice responded as she approached him. Mino immediately dropped to one knee as she came closer, expressing relief at seeing her safe. His gaze lowered as he reflected on how far she had gone on her own. Despite existing to serve her, he had ended up attacking the very town where she was. Alice apologized to Mino and told him not to worry about it. Mino then turned his attention to Kagami, realizing that Kagami had not been lying after all. Kagami simply smiled in response. Correcting himself, Mino addressed Kagami properly and expressed gratitude toward the brave individuals who had been protecting Lady Alice. Takaco reacted with interest, noticing him. Mino was startled and demanded to know who she was. Alice quickly embraced Mino, reassuring him that Takaco was not frightening and that she even accepted demons. Hearing that, Mino offered his apology. Takaco accepted it without issue. Mino introduced himself as Mino to the brave gentleman. Takaco's expression sharpened at that, questioning being referred to as a man. Mino looked between Kagami and Alice in confusion, asking for clarification. They both affirmed that Takaco was a woman. Takaco stepped forward, towering over Mino, and introduced herself as Takaco Builda. Faced with this, Mino became visibly uneasy and offered his sincerest apologies. Kagami pulled out a map and began laying out the situation. Since Mino was releasing noticeable demonic power, it would be necessary to keep him out of sight. Because of that, they would have no choice but to continue on foot from there. Alice, Takaco, and Mino listened as he explained the plan. Mino hesitated and then spoke up, drawing Alice's attention. As she turned to him, he admitted that something had been on his mind for a while, specifically about her demonic power. Alice understood immediately that he could not sense it. She parted her hair and showed him the reason. It was because of a special cloth she had received from Kagami. He had also given her the ribbon she wore. Thanks to it, she had even been able to enter the town of Valman. Mino was stunned by this and realized that Kagami was the one responsible. Kagami cut in, noting that the item was extremely rare and that he had only been able to make one. Mino began to question whether they truly did not despise demons, but before he could finish, a voice suddenly called out to Kagami. Mino reacted sharply at the call. At that moment, a massive fireball came flying toward them. Kagami managed to dodge just in time, but the map in his hands was caught in the flames. He turned his gaze toward the source of the attack. Rex declared that Kagami had finally revealed his true nature. Kagami let out a quiet sigh, recognizing the arrival of the hero. Palna remarked that it was just as she had suspected. Kuru added that she had sensed something was off. Tina pointed out that traveling with demons meant that the claim about being siblings had been a lie. The hero party called for everyone to prepare themselves, labeling Kagami and Takaco as traitors. Kagami reacted with mild annoyance, questioning why they had appeared one after another. Rex insisted that there was no way for Kagami to talk his way out of this situation. Kagami scratched his head, then noted how they were being surrounded. Kuru angrily made it clear that it was to prevent them from escaping. Hearing that, Kagami immediately moved, rushing straight toward Kuru. Kuru reacted in confusion, caught off guard. Kagami closed the distance before she could respond and lightly touched her head, declaring that this time she scored 0 points. To him, there was no point in fighting when facing an opponent that could not be beaten. Rex charged in immediately after. Kagami intercepted the attack, blocking his sword and questioning what had happened to their strategy of surrounding him. Rex dismissed it, admitting that such tactics did not work on someone like Kagami. Kagami raised his voice, urging him to give up already. Rex refused, holding firm to the belief that if heroes gave up, no one would be left to fight villains. Kagami paused briefly, thinking to himself that Rex lacked skill and acted recklessly, yet still had courage. He grabbed Rex's sword and pointed out that it would not be good if the hero were to fall here. Rex pulled back and avoided him, reacting by calling him a monster. Kagami accepted that label without resistance, telling them to leave this so-called monster alone and return to their mission of defeating the Demon King. Tina pointed out that one of the Demon King's subordinates was right in front of them. Palna added that many had suffered from the previous day's attack, making it impossible to simply let the one responsible walk away. Kagami let out a quiet sigh, admitting that they had a point. There was no denying that Mino had gone on a rampage in the town. For that, he turned to Mino, suggesting that an apology would be appropriate. Mino responded with a sharp glare, unable to accept that idea. From his perspective, demons had been humiliated repeatedly as a result of the events from the previous day. Alice watched him with a quiet sadness. Rex rejected the idea entirely, insisting that it was not something that could be settled with an apology. To him, demons that threatened human lives were evil, and anyone who cooperated with them was no different. Hearing that, Kagami moved instantly, closing in on Rex. He seized Rex's sword and challenged that claim, questioning who had decided such a thing and doubting the reasoning behind it. Rex struggled, unable to free his weapon from Kagami's grip, and began to panic as he tried to understand what Kagami meant. Kagami then pointed toward Alice, asking whether she appeared evil. Rex believed he understood demons, yet failed to recognize that she was the Demon King's daughter. The realization struck Rex with shock. Kagami pointed out that despite every encounter they had, Rex had never once noticed it. Kagami questioned whether it was because Rex had never truly seen her as completely evil. Rex paused for a moment, frustration building as he struggled with the thought. Kagami affirmed that it was the truth. While monsters born from demon horns posed a danger to humans, demons themselves were no different from humans aside from the harm caused by those monsters. Because of that, he refused to allow his demon companions to be killed. With that, Kagami gripped Rex's sword and snapped it with his bare hand. Rex and the others could only stare in shock at the broken blade. Kururu pointed out that regardless of that argument, the one who attacked the town was, by all appearances, still a criminal. Mino remained calm and unaffected. Kagami turned toward him, grabbed him, and forced him into a bow. He offered an apology on Mino's behalf. Tina reacted in surprise at the sudden acknowledgement. Kagami explained that Mino had only been following orders, and according to Alice, the Demon King had not been in good condition lately. Kururu questioned what that meant. Kagami revealed that he had actually met the Demon King before. The others were left stunned. Rex reacted strongly, unable to accept it. Kagami continued, explaining that from what he had seen, the Demon King did not seem like someone who desired the destruction of humanity. Because of that, he did not believe the recent attack reflected the Demon King's will. The Demon King's presence had been intimidating, and it made him want to see the situation for himself. Rex trembled with anger, rejecting everything outright. He could not accept that Kagami had met the Demon King, nor the claim that such a figure would not seek humanity's destruction. To him, it sounded like nothing but lies, and he demanded to know what Kagami was basing those claims on. Kururu supported that stance, insisting that demons were humanity's greatest enemy. Kagami then asked a simple question, whether the Demon King's army had ever attacked humans before. Rex fell silent, stopping to think. As he reflected on it, he realized that it had not happened. Humans had been slaughtering any demons they came across, yet not once had the Demon King retaliated. Rex began to realize something, considering the slim chance that Kagami might be telling the truth. If the Demon King was not what they believed, then it raised a troubling question about what they had been fighting for all this time. Palna suddenly raised her voice, firmly declaring that the Demon King was still the enemy. Rex noticed as she began casting a spell and reacted in alarm. Palna urged everyone to pull themselves together, refusing to let doubt take hold. She launched a fireball toward Kagami, insisting that the attack on Valman by demons the previous day was an undeniable fact. From her perspective, there was even a possibility that Kagami had been influenced or controlled by demons. Kagami reacted by pointing to himself, but Palna continued, warning them not to accept his words without question. Rex and Kururu found themselves torn, uncertain of what to believe. Kagami scratched his head, acknowledging that there was some truth in what she said. Then, raising his voice, he concluded that if that was how they felt, there was nothing more to discuss, and it was time to part ways. Rex and the others froze at his sudden decision. Kagami showed a faint smirk, grabbed Mino, and made his escape without hesitation. The others could only watch in shock as they ran off. Rex was left confused by how abruptly it ended. Tina took their retreat as proof that they had been lying all along. As he fled, Kagami reflected that if they had spoken longer, perhaps understanding could have been reached. For now, he left it at that, saying they would meet again another time. He let out a quiet sigh, realizing they had not been able to accept it. Behind them, Rex and the others began chasing, calling out for them to stop. While running, Kagami thought about how, for humans, living alongside demons meant enduring all the harm caused by monsters. He muttered to himself and called out to Alice. The path toward coexistence was clearly not an easy one. Alice, however, remained hopeful, noting that this time, unlike before, they had at least listened. Takaco and Kagami both smiled at that. Kagami agreed, accepting that fact. He then resolved that until Alice chose to give up, he would remain by her side. Mino looked toward Kagami and called out to him, informing him that a carriage had been prepared just ahead. Kagami reacted with surprise, wondering when that had been arranged. As they approached, the Centauros from earlier turned their attention toward him, addressing him with hostility and warning him not to look at them so casually. Kagami muttered Mino's name under his breath, calling him out with irritation. Mino gave a faint smile as he revealed that he had taken the carriage from a passing merchant. Since he had not killed the man, he saw no issue with it. Takaco remarked that this likely explained how the heroes had managed to track them down. Kagami responded by kicking the carriage, calling out Mino's name in frustration and treating him like a fool. Despite that, they all climbed aboard. Takaco took hold of the whip, struck the Centauros, and set them into motion. The Centauros let out strange sounds as they began to run, while Takaco laughed loudly. Inside the carriage, both Alice and Kagami sat with visible discomfort. Mino offered an apology. In the distance, Rex and the others watched as Kagami's carriage moved farther away. Tina pointed out that they had escaped. Rex noted that their destination remained the same, making another encounter likely. Kururu observed Rex with concern. He reaffirmed to himself that monsters were detestable beings that had to be eliminated and that demons who sought to destroy humanity would not be allowed to escape either. At the same time, a thought lingered in his mind about the possibility of demons who desired peace. He clenched his teeth, reminding himself of his role as a hero. Kuru quietly called out to him. Palna then suggested that they should move on, as they needed to gather supplies for the journey ahead. Rex glanced at her, noticing that she had not shown even the slightest hesitation. Palna responded with certainty, insisting that there was nothing for her to doubt. The others could only look at her in confusion. Not far from the Demon King's castle stood the fortified city of Salaria. As they approached, Alice reacted with awe at the sheer size of its walls, finding it impressive and completely different from the town of Valman. Kagami gave a small smile, noting that Salmaria's proximity to the Demon King's castle meant its regulations were far stricter. Even so, if Alice truly wished to continue, he would support her. Kagami then glanced toward Takaco, questioning why she was riding on the Centauros. Takaco responded with a pleased expression, treating him like a well-behaved child. The Centauros reacted with irritation, insulting Kagami and warning him not to address her so casually. Kagami reflected to himself that they had already taken a dislike to him, then shifted his focus back to the matter at hand, asking if everyone understood the plan. They had come to the city under the pretense of merchants. During their journey, they had acquired the horn of a blue devil they had defeated, an item capable of releasing stored magical energy. To conceal the demonic aura leaking from Mino, they would hide it beneath the items in the carriage. With the horn's effect, they hoped to deceive the inspection. Kagami also asked Takaco to dismount, and she agreed without issue. At the inspection point, the inspector questioned their purpose, noting that it must have been difficult for a villager to travel that far. Kagami responded with an easy smile, expressing relief at having hired such dependable bodyguards. Alice held up the blue horn, Takaco offered a friendly wave, and Kuji added awkwardly that they were indeed reliable. After examining them, the inspector confirmed that everything was in order and allowed them to pass. Kagami expressed his thanks. The inspector then mentioned that a parade was currently drawing large crowds, suggesting they would have a good chance to make a profit. Hearing that, Kagami turned back with curiosity, wondering about the parade. In the streets of Salmaria, performers filled the area, bringing life and movement to every corner. Alice looked around with a bright expression, deeply impressed by the town. Takaco, however, noticed something off in Kagami's expression and questioned what was troubling him. Kagami explained that after asking around for more details, the situation felt unsettling. In the past few days, the city had apparently been attacked by the Demon King's army. The battle ended in Salmaria's victory, and now, by the next day, they were planning to form a subjugation division. Alice's expression shifted to shock upon hearing this. Takaco sought clarification, connecting it to what had happened in Valman. Kagami confirmed that until now, the Demon King had never acted this way before. Winning against the first attack had likely made the people overconfident, and the celebration taking place now was for that victory. He continued, explaining that the monsters roaming near the Demon King's castle were extremely powerful. A subjugation force sent there would likely be wiped out, and at best, only half might survive. The fact that the Demon King's army had chosen this town as their first target raised concern. If this cycle of retaliation and continuous conflict continued, then any chance of coexistence would likely be lost. Takaco noticed Alice's worried expression and pointed out that stopping the subjugation force at this point would be difficult. If the demon army were to attack again, defending Salmaria would become even more challenging. Kagami agreed with that assessment. He added that the island of Atros, where the Demon King's castle stood, contained a spawn block, which produced monsters of extremely high levels. On top of that, in preparation for a larger assault, there was a strong possibility that a large number of monsters had already been gathered. Kagami continued, pointing out that if a demon chose to act, they could wipe out their opponents all at once. Even a fortified city like Salmaria would not be able to withstand such an invasion. Takaco acknowledged that his reasoning might be correct. Kagami then revealed that he had come up with an idea. Instead of forming a subjugation force, they would go directly to meet the Demon King, attempt to persuade him, and then flee together with the entire demon race. Alice and Takaco both stared at him, caught off guard. Alice reacted in confusion, while Takaco, though understanding his intentions, found the plan far too reckless. Kagami looked toward her as she continued, raising a serious concern. If the Demon King truly desired the destruction of humanity, then what would Kagami do? In that situation, could she simply ignore it and stand by? Alice found herself agreeing with that thought. If her father truly intended to wage war against humans, then she would. Before that thought could fully form, Kagami cut it off, declaring that if it came to that he would fight. Alice was moved by his resolve. Kagami then clarified that such a fight would not be carried out alone, but with both humans and demons united as allies, working together toward coexistence. Takaco, Alice, and Mino were all taken aback by the idea of such an alliance. Kagami, with a faint smirk, explained that they would gather those from both sides who wished to end the conflict. If they searched for them, he believed they would find many who shared that desire. Takaco questioned whether that was truly possible in a situation like this. She recalled her earlier doubts, wondering if humans and demons could really coexist peacefully. Mino quietly observed the exchange. Kagami began to respond, but Alice stepped in before he could finish. She pointed out that they had already achieved something similar. When Kagami turned to her, she continued, expressing her intention to join this allied force herself. Mino reacted with surprise, while Takaco and Kagami both looked at her. Kagami reminded her that by doing so, she might one day have to face her own father. Alice accepted that possibility, even if her father truly intended to go to war against humans. Alice held firmly to her belief, refusing to give up on the idea of coexistence between their races. If she were to abandon it here, everything would come to an end. Before she could continue, Kagami gently patted her head, encouraging that they would move forward and do their best together. Alice responded with a small, bright smile. She then turned her attention to Mino, wondering about his decision. Mino reflected on his position as a loyal subject to his demonic highness, yet at the same time, he could not bring himself to leave Lady Alice alone. Acting on that resolve, he suddenly jumped out of the carriage, declaring that he would not leave her side. Alice and Kagami reacted at once to his sudden movement. Takaco observed as Kagami quickly pulled Mino back inside, scolding him for acting carelessly. She laughed at the situation, finding him foolish, and then expressed her own interest in joining them as well. Alice responded warmly to that, while Kagami accepted it without hesitation, deciding that from this point on, they would all continue together. The Centauros added their own rough remarks, stating that regardless of what was said, they would accompany them, expecting some form of appreciation. Kagami lifted his spirits and declared their next step, pushing forward with the decision to head toward the Demon King's castle. At the Salaria Inn, Kagami remarked that while their current mood was high, he would have preferred to leave the place as soon as possible. Takaco immediately corrected his posture, telling him to sit properly. She then explained that after the recent attack, the front gates were now closed before sunset, and the guard station there had become especially strict. Alice let out a quiet sigh, realizing that slipping out unnoticed would be extremely difficult. Kagami added that they also needed to avoid drawing attention, so once the gates reopened, they should leave without delay. Alice agreed with that plan. She then pointed out that since the subjugation division would be large, it would take time for them to depart, meaning they could reach their destination ahead of it. Kagami nodded, finding that it matched his own thinking. Takaco observed the two of them as they discussed things calmly. She found it surprising that they were not more flustered, instead working through the situation with clear heads. Then, in a sudden shift, Kagami lifted Alice onto his shoulders, as if demonstrating something. Takaco laughed at the sight, wondering what they were doing. Watching them, she could not help but feel that the idea of peace between humans and demons did not seem so impossible. She clapped her hands to regain their attention, putting an end to their antics. She then suggested that since they could not all move around freely, the two of them should go and enjoy the parade. Alice hesitated, feeling that it was not the right time for such things, and also worried about leaving Mino behind. Takaco reassured her, recalling that Mino had said there was no need to worry about him. Then, turning her attention to Kagami, she firmly instructed him to escort Alice around the town. Alice apologized, while Kagami tried to object, only to be silenced by Takako's sharp glare. At the street parade, Alice looked around in complete awe, taking in everything with excitement as she realized this was what a parade was like. The entire town was alive with energy. Kagami watched her with a small smile, telling her to settle down and suggesting they calm themselves by getting something to eat. As they stood there, a performer approached and handed Alice a balloon, charmed by her presence. Alice accepted it, momentarily puzzled. Soon after, a baker offered her some freshly made bread, and then another passerby handed her kebabs. One after another, she received gifts, leaving her overwhelmed yet delighted by the kindness around her. Alice reacted with excitement, noting how many things people had given her again. Kagami laughed, pointing out that the same thing had happened back in Valman, almost as if it were some natural talent of hers. Alice then passed all the food she had received over to Kagami, suggesting that they should share it together. Kagami hesitated, unsure if she really meant it, but Alice insisted. From her perspective, he had always been looking after her, and by eating he could maintain his strength. Kagami was quietly moved, thinking that despite her being so young, she was straightforward and sincere, even worrying about him in her own way. Still, he reassured her that there was no need for concern anymore because of a certain skill he possessed. Alice asked about it, and Kagami explained that it was called auto-revive, a skill that allowed minor injuries to heal naturally. Alice understood then why he never appeared hurt, finding him truly remarkable. She felt a growing desire to be helpful to everyone as well. Kagami scratched his head and told her that she was already being helpful. Before she had appeared, he had already given up on the idea of coexistence. Alice tried to ask what he meant, but Kagami's attention suddenly shifted elsewhere. Spotting something, he became distracted and focused on getting food, asking if she minded. Alice reacted, trying to stop him and return to what he had said earlier, wanting clarification. Kagami avoided the question, acting as if he did not fully explain himself. Just then he caught a familiar voice nearby. It was Rex and his group, with Palna commenting on his slow eating and Rex insisting on proper table manners. Kagami and Rex's eyes met. Rex immediately stood up, reacting to the encounter. Meanwhile, on Atros Island at the Demon King's castle, numerous monsters stood assembled, prepared and waiting. Somewhere in Salaria, Kagami reacted with surprise upon noticing Rex again, recognizing the persistent hero. He quickly moved to shield Alice as Rex approached, intent on meeting him once more and addressing him as a mere villager. The chef nearby stepped in to remind them to keep their voices down inside the restaurant. Rex lowered his head in apology before continuing, intent on asking Kagami something. However, when he looked around, Kagami had already slipped away. Tina struck the table in frustration, pointing out that he had run off again, and her patience was beginning to wear thin. Rex urged the group to move quickly and pursue him. Despite their efforts, they eventually stopped, realizing they had lost him. Palna turned to Rex, questioning what they should do next while criticizing him. Rex reacted to being called an idiot, but steadied himself, noting that at least they now knew Kagami was somewhere in the city. Tina suggested informing the townspeople and organizing a search, but Rex hesitated. He decided they should hold off for now, uncertain of how Kagami might respond. Tina grew concerned at the thought that Kagami might harm anyone who found him, but Rex struggled to clarify his thoughts before being interrupted. Kuru stepped in, asserting that such a situation was unlikely. She pointed out that during their previous encounter, they had come out completely unharmed. From her perspective, Kagami did not seem like a bad person. Tina reacted to her statement, but Palna quickly cut in with irritation. Kuru raised her voice, emphasizing that Kagami had approached them with the intention of talking. When they attacked him without giving him a chance, he had not fought back. He had not tried to force his beliefs onto them or use strength to make them submit. Instead, he had simply chosen to leave. Rex acknowledged that Kagami often carried himself in a way that seemed to look down on others, yet he also recognized that they should not carelessly harm others. He was troubled by the way Kagami kept retreating and felt that cornering him would only make things worse. Palna questioned what that meant for their next move, challenging whether they should simply continue chasing him or begin sympathizing with demons. Rex clarified that there was something he wanted to ask Kagami. Kuru added that she also wanted to understand why he was protecting demons, and that the next time they met, she intended to ask him directly. Even so, she reassured the others that their goal of defeating demons had not changed. Back in the city of Salaria, Kagami and Alice paused to catch their breath, surprised at how quickly they had managed to get away. Alice nodded while still panting, equally caught off guard. Kagami remarked that they seemed to keep running into the same people over and over again. Their attention soon shifted to a lively crowd gathered nearby. Kagami observed how excited everyone seemed. Alice tried to see what was happening, but her height made it difficult. Noticing this, Kagami lifted her up, asking if her view was better. Even then, he found it surprising how she remained enthusiastic about the festival. Alice apologized, but Kagami reassured her that it was fine, adding that it was a good opportunity to experience new things. They stopped by a nearby stall, where Kagami bought ice cream. Alice tasted it and was amazed, thinking that humans were truly remarkable to have created something so delicious. She felt that others should also be given the chance to try such things. As they continued, Alice noticed people rushing past, urging others to hurry because something was about to begin. The crowd surged forward, drawing their curiosity. Suddenly, Alice reacted in shock upon spotting a monster. The surrounding crowd shouted with excitement, urging action. Confused, Alice wondered what was happening and why everyone seemed so eager. Kagami explained that it was part of a festival performance, where warriors would demonstrate their strength by defeating a weak monster. Then, a loud explosion echoed, startling them. A much larger monster appeared, far more dangerous than expected. Some initially assumed it was part of an elaborate act, but that illusion quickly shattered when the creature began attacking, slashing through the crowd as people screamed in panic. It became clear that this was no performance. Kagami immediately pulled Alice close, shielding her and warning her to stay back. As he assessed the situation, he realized that even if he began gathering power for his skill, it would take time. He quickly considered what to do next. A nearby person cried out in fear as the large monster advanced. At that moment, Kuru stepped in and cast a divine shield. The monster crashed into the barrier, forcing her to strain under the impact. Kuru and the person beside her were violently pushed back into a wall. She reacted with frustration as the impact settled. The person beside her questioned whether she felt no fear, then urged her to forget about him and escape. Kururu refused to retreat. To her, protecting the people was the duty of the nobility, and she would not abandon others to save herself. The person noticed that despite her resolve, her body trembled as she faced the approaching monster. As it drew closer, Kururu realized that she could no longer move. Just as the creature reached out toward her, Kagami suddenly appeared in front of her and stopped its attack with one hand. Kururu was left in shock at his sudden presence. Kagami immediately countered, driving his fist into the monster's face with a powerful strike. The blow sent the creature flying backward. Kururu dropped to her knees, overwhelmed by what had just happened. Kagami turned his attention to her, remarking that this time she had earned a perfect score. Kururu could only stare at him. At that moment, her party arrived, calling out to her. Tina reacted with shock upon recognizing Kagami's level. Kagami remarked that such a reaction should have come from him instead. Rex stepped forward and grabbed him, confirming his identity and making it clear that he would not let him escape this time. He questioned how Kagami had managed to defeat such a monster. Kagami explained that while the monster had been strong, he had used a technique called charge blow. Rex was taken aback, realizing that a basic technique had been enough to bring it down. Kagami added that it was the only move he could use quickly in that moment. Rex fixed his gaze on him, feeling there was much to discuss. Palna and Tina looked on in confusion. Kagami responded calmly, accepting the idea of a discussion, but first insisted they confirm whether any other monsters were nearby. Kururu hesitated briefly before stepping forward. She grasped his hands and expressed her gratitude for being saved. Kagami brushed it off, explaining that she had bought enough time for him to gather the energy needed to defeat the monster in a single strike. Palna observed that even when it was not a demon, he still chose to save others. Kagami let out a quiet sigh, considering himself a neutral party. Suddenly, a man rushed toward them, urgently trying to get their attention. He demanded to know what they were doing and insisted they needed to flee immediately. Kagami questioned whether this meant more monsters were nearby. The man clarified that it was something far worse. A massive swarm of monsters from Alstoro Island was heading toward them, numbering around 10,000. Kagami's eyes widened at the scale of it. The man declared that the town was beyond saving. A man urgently informed Kagami and the others that a massive horde of monsters was heading toward the town. Alice tried to object, but the man firmly insisted it was true, emphasizing that nearly 10,000 monsters were approaching. Kagami turned toward Rex and called out to him. Rex responded, waiting for what he had to say. Kagami urged him to begin evacuating the townspeople as quickly as possible, while he would move swiftly to locate his other companions. Before leaving, Kagami added that he would entrust Alice to Rex and his group. Rex and the others were visibly shaken by this. Rex reacted strongly, questioning whether Kagami had lost his senses, reminding him that demons were considered their sworn enemies. From his perspective, leaving Alice in their care made no sense, especially if they chose to harm her. He struggled to understand how Kagami could make such a decision. Kagami responded that if Rex truly intended to harm her, he would not be making this request. He also reminded him of his earlier desire to have a discussion. Rex hesitated, acknowledging that point, but before he could continue, Palna interjected, questioning whether Kagami simply did not care about the outcome if something happened to Alice. Kagami's expression showed concern as he pleaded with them to protect her, asking them earnestly to ensure her safety. Faced with that sincerity, Palna and the others found themselves unable to refuse. They watched as Kagami quickly ran off. Tina remarked that he had sounded genuinely desperate. Palna then turned to Alice, interpreting the situation as her being left behind. Alice, however, did not see it that way. She believed that Kagami had entrusted her to them with full confidence, and because of that, she chose to believe in them as well. Kururu was quietly moved by Alice's conviction. Alice lowered her gaze, thinking about what would happen when the massive horde finally arrived and wondering what she should do. Kururu stepped forward and gently embraced her, offering reassurance and telling her not to burden herself with such worries. She assured her that they would keep their promise, reminding her that Alice was not a threat. Palna let out a sigh, stating that this was not the time for such moments, and moved ahead. Kururu then encouraged Alice to join them, focusing on working together to safely evacuate everyone in the town. As Rex fought off the incoming monsters, the others moved alongside Alice, spreading the warning to the townspeople. Soon, both the hero party and Alice raised their voices together, urging everyone to evacuate as a massive horde of monsters approached. Panic spread as they called for people to run and get to safety. Amid the chaos, debris suddenly flew toward Alice, but Rex reacted quickly, stepping in to block it and warning her to be careful. Kururu checked on her condition, and Alice expressed her gratitude. Rex reminded her to stay alert, though he was interrupted before he could finish. A voice suddenly shouted in anger, demanding that they get away from Alice. Takaco and Mino arrived, immediately focusing on her safety and asking if she was unharmed. Rex recognized them at once. Alice called out to them as well. Rex addressed Takaco bluntly, recalling that Kagami had gone to look for them. Alice quickly corrected him, clarifying that Takaco was a woman. Rex froze in confusion at that realization, and Alice firmly reaffirmed it. Takaco responded with a slight frown, commenting on their unusual situation. Mino stepped forward with intensity, demanding that Alice be released immediately. In response, Alice moved toward him without hesitation. Rex, however, pointed out that even if Mino concealed his horns, his demonic presence could still be sensed. He explained that Kagami had entrusted Alice to them for protection. Takaco questioned Kagami's intentions, trying to understand his reasoning. Rex then explained the situation in full to both Takaco and Mino. After hearing everything, Takaco acknowledged that she understood what was happening. She decided that they would also search for Kagami, noting that there was only one road leading to the inn and wondering if he had taken a wrong turn. Rex grew increasingly frustrated, questioning where Kagami had gone. At that moment, a man rushed in, calling for help and reporting that someone was fighting a horde of monsters at the west gate. Everyone else had already fled, leaving a single individual standing against the swarm alone. Alice reacted in shock upon hearing this. The situation grew more urgent, with the realization that at this rate, the one fighting alone would not survive. Calls for help echoed, urging someone to save him. Alice immediately thought of Kagami. If humans continued to hate demons for the destruction of their homes, then the idea of coexistence would become impossible. Yet Kagami was trying to protect everyone on his own. Without hesitation, she began running toward the west gate. Takaco noticed and called out to her, but Alice pressed on, thinking that even for Kagami, facing such overwhelming numbers alone was too much. Before she could go further, Takaco quickly caught up and lifted her onto her shoulders, deciding that it would be faster this way. Alice reacted in surprise, realizing Takaco had joined her. She was certain that the person being spoken about was Kagami. Takaco agreed, urging them to hurry. Even if Kagami possessed a recovery skill, the number of enemies was far too great for him to handle alone. Takaco then called for Mino to follow, deciding that they would move across the rooftops to reach their destination faster. She acknowledged that even for someone like Kagami, this was not a situation one could face alone. Acting like this was reckless, something only a fool would attempt. Rex reacted with disbelief, questioning whether Kagami had a death wish. Alice turned to him in surprise, realizing he was coming as well. Takaco questioned his intent, wondering if he was actually going to help them. Rex made it clear that after hearing what was happening, he could not simply ignore it. More than that, he could not understand why Kagami would take on such a situation without any support. Takaco reasoned that Kagami likely wanted to prevent anyone else from getting hurt, whether human or demon. Rex struggled to accept that, questioning whether acting in such a way was not the same as throwing one's life away. Takaco maintained that whether it seemed foolish or not, as long as there was even a 1% chance of success, Kagami would never give up. Rex countered that even so, there was a clear difference between recklessness and true bravery. Takaco responded that for Kagami, when it came to protecting those he cared about, fear for his own life simply did not exist. Rex lowered his gaze, thinking about how he had already prepared himself for such risks, but Takaco cut that thought short, making it clear that this was not about preparation at all. Rex reacted, caught off guard by her words. At that moment, Mino suddenly came to a stop at the entrance of the west gate. Rex questioned the abrupt halt, but his attention shifted immediately as he noticed the scene ahead. Every monster near the gate had already been slain. The sight left him stunned, unable to understand how such a thing was possible. Beyond the fallen creatures stood Kagami, surrounded by even more monsters, ready to face them. The idea that someone considered a mere villager could possess such overwhelming strength left Rex in disbelief. Alice called out to Kagami as she saw him. A massive snake-like monster lunged toward Kagami, but he caught it mid-attack and tore its body apart with his bare hands. Rex watched in shock, struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. The sheer power displayed raised a question in his mind, whether Kagami could truly be human at all. This was the strength of a level 999 villager. As Rex, Alice, Takaco, and Mino watched, Kagami moved through the overwhelming sea of monsters with ease, cutting them down one after another. Rex found it hard to believe, unable to understand why Kagami would push himself this far. Takaco began to recall Kagami's past. When he was still a child, monsters had killed his father right before his eyes. The grief, frustration, and helplessness left a deep mark on him. He could not forgive his own weakness. He resented a world where villagers were destined to be weak, and he directed that resentment toward monsters, demons, and even himself. From that point on, Kagami sought strength by defeating monsters. However, he initially fought them from a distance, throwing rocks to stay safe. While this allowed him to defeat low-level monsters, there was a clear limit. No matter how many he defeated in that way, his experience did not increase, and his level remained unchanged. In the end, he was still confined by his weakness, avoiding danger rather than overcoming it. Realizing this, he abandoned his safe approach and began challenging monsters head-on. Even though it was nearly suicidal for a villager, he chose to face them directly. He needed to know whether he was truly weak, whether he would have to give up on avenging his father and simply continue living as he was, and whether such a life held any meaning. At one point, the young Kagami lay exhausted on the ground after confronting goblin monsters. To him, they felt overwhelmingly strong, though it also made him question whether it was simply that villagers were that weak. As he reached a hand toward the sky, something changed. The level that had remained stuck for so long finally increased, rising from 4 to 5. In that moment, Kagami came to understand a fundamental rule of the world. When an enemy was defeated under extremely unfavorable conditions, even if they were of the same level, the experience gained would increase in proportion to the gap in strength. The more a person's equipment and fighting ability fell short compared to their opponent, the greater the experience they would gain. It was a harsh rule, one that demanded risking one's life in exchange for growth. For a villager, their only advantage lay in their overwhelming weakness. The young Kagami came to a startling realization and laughed. He wondered if villagers would die once they became stronger, and decided that it did not matter. If strength required his life as payment, then so be it. He resolved to use that very weakness as his weapon, directing his hatred toward monsters and the demons that gave rise to them, vowing to destroy them all. True to that resolve, he repeatedly threw himself into battles where he stood at a clear disadvantage, risking his life over and over again. He carried the weight of the grudge left behind by his father's death. At one point, after wandering far from his village, the young Kagami hurried back home. As he arrived, he froze at the sight before him. The villagers were gone, their bodies scattered across the ground. Panic set in as he searched for his mother. Takaco later explained that the village had been completely wiped out by a group of bandits. Alice lowered her gaze, unable to accept it easily. Kagami's father had been killed by monsters, and his mother had been killed by humans. Mino came to understand the meaning behind this. Rex, reflecting silently, realized that Kagami had lost both parents in such a way. Takaco went on to explain that Kagami had eventually chosen a neutral path, and that meeting Alice's father had played a major role in shaping that decision. Alice reacted with surprise at that revelation, and Takaco suggested that she should hear the details directly from Kagami himself. At that moment, a voice rose with urgency, declaring that they could not allow Kagami to die. Rex reacted, recognizing Kururu's resolve. Takaco showed approval, while Alice also made up her mind to do everything she could for Kagami. Meanwhile, as Kagami continued fighting, his thoughts turned inward. If monsters did not exist, then there would be no need to fight demons. Without such roles dividing them, perhaps everyone could have lived together peacefully. In that world, his father and mother might not have had to die. He questioned who had decided that things had to be this way. As more monsters swarmed him, piling on from all sides, he struggled beneath the weight. Even if it was the world itself that had created these rules, he could not accept them. A massive monster loomed above him, opening its jaws and unleashing an attack toward his pinned-down body, pushing him to the edge as he faced whether he could defy it. As a massive monster released a powerful attack toward Kagami, he remained pinned beneath a pile of demons, struggling to move while realizing he could not escape in time. Even in that moment, he reflected on what he had already accomplished. The number of enemies had been reduced, and because of that, the morale of Salmaria's adventurers would rise. The town would not fall so easily. Even if only slightly, the possibility of coexistence would still remain. With that thought in mind, a faint smile formed on his face as the incoming attack closed the distance. He accepted what was about to happen and prepared to face it directly. At the final moment, however, the attack was suddenly deflected. The force scattered debris and smoke across the battlefield. As the dust began to clear, Kagami looked ahead in surprise and saw Kuru standing before him, breathing heavily, her frustration evident at how close he had come to dying. Kagami stared at her, still trying to understand her presence. At the same time, Rex appeared at his side and struck with force, cutting through the surrounding enemies. His actions reflected his resolve as a hero, unwilling to abandon someone to fight alone. Kagami dropped to the ground, stunned that both the hero and the sage had arrived, seemingly ready to risk themselves. Soon after, Takaco rushed toward them without hesitation. To Kagami's disbelief, she charged straight at the massive monster and brought it down with overwhelming strength. He could not understand why she had come to such a dangerous place and insisted that actions like this would only lead to unnecessary loss, believing that he alone should bear that burden. At that moment, Mino appeared beside him, making it clear that he would share that burden as well. Kagami was taken aback, unable to understand why a demon would involve himself in this. Mino challenged that thinking, pointing out that Kagami himself had been ready to throw his life away without purpose. Before Kagami could respond, more allies arrived. Tina approached and began treating his injuries, while Palna joined them, determined to make him answer for his actions later. Overwhelmed, Kagami watched as everyone moved together in coordination, pushing back and defeating the surrounding demons. Kururu made it clear through her actions that they had all come to bring him back safely and would overcome the situation together. Kagami struggled to grasp their resolve, questioning whether they were all willing to risk their lives so carelessly. Kururu rejected that idea outright, showing through her stance that none of them intended to die, nor would they allow him to fall. Surrounded by their support, as they fought and protected him, Kagami began to realize that he was no longer alone. Elsewhere, Alice watched the battle from behind cover, observing how everyone had come together for Kagami. Strengthened by what she saw, she made up her mind and turned back towards Salaria, ready to act. Back on the battlefield, Kagami turned his attention to Alice, wondering where she had gone. Mino informed him that she had gone to find a safe place to hide, leaving Kagami to take in the situation. As the fight continued, Kagami initially urged the others to retreat and take cover. However, he stopped mid-thought when he noticed the firm expressions from Kururu and Takaco. Seeing their resolve, he abandoned the idea. Letting out a quiet sigh, he accepted the circumstances and decided that they would only fall back if it became absolutely necessary. This would not be a reckless sacrifice. Rising to his feet, he steadied himself and prepared to bring the battle to an end. Tina showed her support, ready to assist him. Kagami then charged forward toward a demon that was hurling rocks, moving with confidence. However, he was immediately struck by a projectile and sent flying back toward his allies. Tina rushed to check on him, concerned. Despite the impact, Kagami laughed it off, admitting that he had pushed himself too far, especially knowing she was there to heal him. Tina corrected him firmly, reminding him of her role and the importance of her safety, urging him not to act carelessly. Kagami accepted her point and agreed. He then admitted that he had never truly fought alongside others before. Thinking back on his earlier words, he expressed regret over what he had said about the princess. With a slight smile, he acknowledged that they would fight as a team even if it seemed obvious to everyone else. Looking upward, Kagami noticed the flying enemies and recognized them as a major threat. After a brief moment of thought, he called Kururu and Palna closer. Without hesitation, he grabbed both of them by the waist, catching them off guard. Ignoring their reactions, he focused on the task and asked them to prepare their magic. Before they could fully respond, Kagami leapt high into the air, carrying both of them with him. As they reached the height of the flying demons, he directed their attention toward the targets. Kururu and Palna reacted quickly, casting their spells and eliminating the airborne enemies one after another, with Kagami positioning them perfectly in the air. Together, they cleared the skies efficiently. After landing, Kagami acknowledged their success. Impressed by the strength of magic users, Tina immediately stepped in to treat any injuries they had sustained. At the same time, Palna silently simmered with frustration over Kagami's actions, while Kururu questioned his behavior. Still confused by their reactions, Kagami explained that he believed they had simply been working together as a team. His words left them momentarily speechless. Palna quietly held onto her irritation, while Kururu, still flustered, chose to accept his reasoning. As the group regained their composure, Takaco stepped forward, unwilling to be left behind as the battle continued. Takaco moved decisively, assigning Rex to deal with the weaker enemies while she took on the stronger ones herself. Rex resisted the idea, insisting that he should handle them, but Takaco paid no attention and charged forward. With overwhelming strength, she cut down every demon in her path. Watching her, Rex felt both astonishment and frustration, quietly resolving that he would one day surpass her. Mino remarked that it would be troublesome if someone like Rex became even stronger, but Rex showed no hesitation and pushed forward with determination, continuing the fight. As time passed, more demons fell, their bodies piling across the battlefield. However, the group began to show clear signs of fatigue. Kagami observed them closely and recognized the growing danger. Everyone was nearing their limit, and the number of remaining enemies made it clear that they could not continue like this. He concluded that while they still had the ability to move, they should retreat before it was too late. Kagami tried to call for a withdrawal, but Takaco cut him off before he could finish. She refused to accept it, pointing out that they still had strength left and that they had no intention of abandoning anyone. Kururu supported her stance, making it clear that although they understood what Kagami was trying to do, they would not agree to it. Kagami maintained a faint smile, but inside he was unsettled, struggling to find a way forward. If things continued like this, everyone could lose their lives. Amid that tension, he suddenly heard a voice calling out to him. He snapped back to reality and recognized it immediately. Alice had returned. Her presence alone gave him a sense of relief, yet at the same time, he could not understand why she had come back to such a dangerous place. Alice called out again, drawing his attention. As he turned toward her, he was surprised to see several others standing behind her. Confusion crossed his face as he tried to understand who they were. Alice, however, remained confident, showing him through her expression that things would be all right. As the group took notice, someone recognized the newcomers as adventurers from Salaria. With firm resolve, Alice stepped forward, determined to help save Kagami. Before he could fully process it, the adventurers raised their voices and rushed into battle, striking down demons as they joined the fight to protect their home. Kagami was left overwhelmed by the sudden shift, struggling to grasp what was happening. Alice revealed that she had sought help from the adventurers, telling them that others were already fighting and desperately needed support. At first, fear had held them back from facing such a massive horde. But after witnessing people continue to fight despite the danger, they found the courage to step forward and join the battle. She showed her gratitude toward those who had been fighting from the very beginning. Hearing this, Kagami felt a quiet embarrassment. As he stood near Alice, Kuru watched the two of them from a distance. She reflected on how a single villager, standing alone against 10,000 monsters, had managed to inspire so many adventurers. The scene reminded her of the heroic tales she had once read in the castle's library. Kuru's attention shifted as she heard Rex nearby. Watching him, she saw him let out a breath before breaking into a grin, clearly energized by the presence of such an unusual villager. Rex resolved to see the battle through to the very end. Kagami noticed this as Rex rushed back toward the monsters once more, and that determination stirred something in him. He decided that he would also give everything he had. Even so, he warned Alice that the battlefield remained dangerous and that she should stay back. Alice agreed without hesitation, though she carried a small sense of regret, having truly wanted to help him this time. Kagami turned toward her and gently placed a hand on her head, catching her off guard. To him, what she had done was already remarkable. Despite being a demon, she had convinced so many people to step forward and help others. That alone was something worth recognizing. Hearing this, Alice's eyes began to fill with tears. Kagami lowered himself slightly and offered his thanks with a soft expression, and Alice responded with quiet happiness. As the battle pressed on, even more monsters appeared, forcing the adventurers to ready themselves once again. From a distance, Kagami observed them fighting bravely, standing their ground despite the overwhelming threat. With renewed resolve, he decided that they would give everything they had and claim victory. He moved forward once more, charging back into the battle. Rex joined in with equal intensity. Nearby, Mino reflected silently on how these same people might one day stand as his enemies. Takaco, however, urged Kagami to focus only on the fight ahead, assuring him that things would hold on their side and encouraging him to unleash his full strength. Without hesitation, Kagami rushed straight toward the towering one-eyed monster. He pushed forward, striking down any creature that stood in his path, sending them flying as he advanced. The Salaria adventurers watched in disbelief, questioning where such overwhelming strength came from and how he could continue fighting with such intensity after everything he had already endured. The massive creature loomed over him, but before it could strike, Kagami seized it by the leg. With all his strength, he lifted the enormous body and began spinning it around. The monster's weight and size turned into a weapon, sweeping through the battlefield and crushing the surrounding enemies. The adventurers could only stare, unable to fully process what they were witnessing. The sight blurred the line between man and monster, yet none of that mattered as long as he fought on their side. Encouraged by this, they pressed forward with renewed determination. After bringing down the giant one-eyed monster, Kagami turned at the sound of cheers behind him. The adventurers, inspired, surged forward once again. He watched as one fighter struck down a monster with a punch, while others worked together to defeat another. The sight stirred something within him, and a small smile appeared as he felt respect for those fighting beside him. Leaning forward, Kagami prepared himself and broke into another run. He charged through the enemy ranks, sending monsters flying in all directions as he passed. More creatures were thrown aside as he continued his relentless advance, showing no sign of stopping. From behind, the adventurers quietly acknowledged that such strength was beyond anything they could match. Elsewhere on the battlefield, Rex dropped to one knee as exhaustion began to catch up with him. Tina approached and offered him a potion, but Rex refused, knowing he had already used too many and that it would no longer help. Kuru urged him to rest. Rex refused to back down, believing that as a hero, he had to continue summoning his courage until the very end. Kuru countered that stepping back or retreating also required courage. Her words caught him off guard. She explained that allowing his exhausted body to recover was just as important, and that pushing himself beyond his limits in a battle like this was not a wise choice. Rex turned his gaze toward Kagami, who was still fighting, and found himself thinking about him. Tina then explained that Kagami was able to rest without concern because of one of his abilities. With that skill, he could recover simply by taking a break, even without relying on recovery items. Rex was surprised to learn that Kagami possessed such a high-level ability. Tina suggested that perhaps Kagami trusted the people around him more than anyone else. Because of that trust, he could confidently step back when needed, knowing his allies would hold the line. Rex continued watching as Kagami faced yet another massive monster. Other adventurers fought alongside him, and Rex began to understand that they were truly being relied upon. He quietly admitted to himself that he could not match Kagami. Tina started to comment on Kagami's level, but Rex stopped that line of thought. What impressed him was not Kagami's strength alone, but his ability to act without hesitation or bias. He recalled how Kagami had treated Alice and recognized the sincerity in it. Kuru shared the same understanding. Elsewhere on the battlefield, Palna noticed Takaco and Mino approaching. Observing their condition, she realized they were taking a brief rest after their efforts. She offered them a potion. Both Takaco and Mino showed clear signs of exhaustion and accepted the need to recover. Palna handed Takaco a potion and advised her to drink it while it was still effective. As Palna handed over the potion, her gaze drifted toward Mino, who was resting nearby. In that quiet moment, a thought crossed her mind. It would be easy to eliminate him while he was vulnerable. Without drawing attention, she slowly raised her hand and aimed it toward the back of his head. Takaco noticed the movement immediately and intervened, stopping her before she could act. She made it clear that such a decision might lead to regret, especially if Palna truly intended to hear what Kagami had to say once everything was over. The warning caught Palna off guard. She glanced at Takaco briefly before lowering her hand. Turning away, she walked off, choosing instead to wait and see how things would unfold. Mino, unaware of the full exchange, remained confused about what had just happened. Takaco reassured him that he would understand in time. Meanwhile, the battle continued without pause. Kagami pressed forward, defeating one monster after another. As he looked across the battlefield, he began to sense a shift. The tide seemed to be turning, and victory no longer felt out of reach. With that realization, he urged everyone to push just a little further. Then, without warning, the ground began to shake violently. Kagami initially considered the possibility of an earthquake, but someone called out, directing attention toward the distance. When he looked up, a massive black creature appeared on the horizon. The monster was enormous, towering far above the surrounding mountains. Its presence alone carried a weight that silenced the battlefield. As everyone took in the sight, a shared understanding spread among them that this was something far beyond what they had faced so far. Kagami could only stare, caught off guard by its scale. The creature continued to advance, each movement reinforcing the danger it posed. Kuru struggled to process what she was seeing, unable to recall anything like it from the kingdom's records. Mino, despite his connection to the Demon King's forces, also had no knowledge of such a being. This realization unsettled Takaco even more. It was clear that the monster's power was not just for show. Recognizing the threat, Takaco urged an immediate retreat, seeing no other option. However, before she could push further, Kagami calmly observed the creature's size. As Takaco watched in disbelief, he stretched his body, preparing himself. By the time she realized what he intended to do, it was already too late. Kagami had already moved, charging straight toward the massive monster, leaving her to quietly condemn the recklessness of his decision. Kagami leapt high into the air, drawing back his arm as he aimed a decisive strike at the monster's head, his focus steady. In the next instant, the creature moved with unexpected speed, evading the attack and countering midair. The impact sent Kagami flying backward, and he crashed hard onto the ground, lying still. The sight shook the adventurers. A sense of despair spread quickly, as some began to believe that even Kagami could not defeat such a monster. The thought that Salaria might be lost took hold, and panic pushed many to retreat. Takaco lowered her gaze, reflecting on the outcome, realizing that even Kagami's attack had failed to leave a mark. Amid the confusion, Alice ran straight to Kagami and lifted his head, trying to bring him back with a potion. Though weakened, Kagami tried to warn her about the danger, but Alice refused to leave him behind. As he slowly regained awareness and managed to sit up, her determination remained clear, choosing to face the situation alongside him. Kagami noticed that beneath her resolve, she was still afraid. He gently urged her not to push herself too far. Before he could continue, another potion was pressed to his mouth, catching him off guard. Kururu, filled with concern, stepped in, making it clear through her actions that his reckless behavior was the reason Alice had been left trembling with fear. Hearing that, Kagami lowered his gaze and quietly acknowledged it, offering an apology through his expression. At that moment, a new presence appeared on the battlefield. A demon descended before them, observing Kagami with a faint sense of amusement at the fact that he was still standing. From his perspective, this unexpected resistance explained the delay in their plans. He had initially assumed that a hero was responsible, only to realize that it had been Kagami instead. In response, Kagami rose to his feet and stepped in front of Alice, positioning himself to shield her. At the same time, Mino moved forward as well. Upon seeing the newcomer, Mino recognized him immediately and addressed him as Lord Estellar. Estellar acknowledged Mino, recalling that he had been reported missing. Seeing him now, he noted that Mino had been occupied with protecting Alice, something that reflected his consistent loyalty to the Demon King. Kagami turned his attention toward the demon, seeking to understand who he was. Mino explained that long before joining the Demon King's service, this individual had already stood at his lord's side as his most trusted subordinate. Estellar Urgot was known as the second strongest among the demons, surpassed only by the Demon King himself. Hearing this, Alice quietly repeated the name to herself, unease settling in. Mino then shifted his focus back to Kagami, checking on his condition. Kagami reassured him that his injuries had been fully healed, explaining that since he had not relied on potions before, their effect had been especially strong. Estellar questioned whether Kagami still intended to resist. Kagami made it clear through his stance that while he would rather deal with the massive monster first, he was prepared to face Estellar as well if necessary. With that resolve, Kagami moved forward once again, rushing toward the enormous black creature, while Estellar remained where he was, calmly watching his advance. After a brief pause, Mino spoke up, cautioning Estellar that Kagami was far from an ordinary human. Though classified as a villager, he had reached the unprecedented level of 999. Estellar reacted with clear dismissal, acknowledging that such a level was rare, yet insisting that Kagami was still nothing more than a villager. To him, that alone made Kagami unworthy of any real recognition. This perspective left Kururu confused, prompting her to question what he meant. Estellar clarified that villagers possessed unusually low base attributes. Even at level 999, they could not compare to specialized classes such as heroes or magicians. From his viewpoint, a villager's strength was so limited that it barely warranted attention. Kururu pushed back against that claim, believing that strength was not defined by level alone and that skills played an equally important role. Estellar responded by pointing out that aside from Kagami's ability to recover on his own, there was little evidence of any exceptional skills. He added that even possessing such an ability was already unusual for a villager. Others of the same class had attempted to surpass level 100 due to their rapid leveling, yet none had ever reached a level as extreme as Kagami's. Even so, Estellar maintained that a villager's skills remained insignificant, reflecting what he saw as the inherent limitations of their class. Kururu found herself unable to respond, while Takaco quietly questioned how Estellar held such detailed knowledge. Continuing, Estellar emphasized that even without considering skills, the difference in raw attributes was undeniable. The opponent Kagami now faced was far beyond what a level 999 villager could realistically overcome. Shifting his attention back to the battlefield, Estellar soon noted that Kagami was returning. At that same moment, Kagami came flying past the group, crashing hard against the ground. Takaco and Kururu immediately rushed toward him, while Alice reacted in alarm at the sight. Estellar remained composed, concluding that Kagami had already reached the peak of his growth. In his view, even with his abilities, this was the limit of what a villager could achieve. Yet from beneath the rubble, Kagami began to rise. He steadied himself and stood firm, facing forward as if rejecting that conclusion. There was a quiet confidence in him as he made it clear through his actions that such limits were not absolute. This time, he had intentionally reduced the damage he took, showing that he was still capable of continuing the fight. Estellar observed closely as Kagami moved back toward Alice and requested a potion. Watching this, he reflected on how a villager's health and stamina were usually inferior even to that of a magician. However, Kagami's endurance clearly exceeded those expectations, suggesting that it was likely supported by a skill. While Estellar acknowledged the persistence Kagami displayed, he ultimately attributed it to that ability, seeing it as the reason he had lasted this long, and viewed surrender as the wiser choice while he still had the chance to survive. After taking the potion, Kagami turned his attention back to Estellar, questioning his intentions and whether he truly meant to wipe them all out. Estellar made it clear that his only goal was the destruction of Salaria, and that anyone who stood in his way would be eliminated. Kagami quietly repeated the idea to himself, realizing that everything was being done solely for the sake of destroying the town. Estellar went further, showing no regard for the lives within it, viewing them as insignificant. At that moment, Alice stepped forward, unable to stay silent. She tried to stop him, holding firm to the belief that her father would never have wished for such an outcome. She sought to reach him, hoping he would reconsider and face the truth again. Estellar's gaze turned cold as he looked at her. Within his thoughts, he acknowledged that neither she nor the Demon King would have chosen this path. His expression hardened as he called forth the enormous black monster. Then came the unsettling question of whether the Demon King would still give the same answer if asked now. The meaning of his words spread unease through everyone present. Mino quickly realized that something was deeply wrong. Estellar then revealed the truth. Controlling the creature had not been simple. By repeatedly administering a drug to weaken it, he had eventually brought the Demon King under his control through his own power. Before them, the massive black monster lowered itself, submitting to his command. Mino was overcome with anger at the revelation, unable to accept what had been done. Estellar remained unmoved, stating that this battle was never the will of the Demon King. It was a conflict created by his own hand. The moment deepened as Estellar revealed the truth, that the Demon King was sealed within the massive black monster. With a darkened expression, he made it clear that the Demon King had never desired this war. It was his own will that had driven it forward. The revelation left everyone shaken. Alice struggled to process what she had just learned, while Kagami sought to confirm whether the figure encased within the black armor was truly the Demon King. Estellar explained that the entity was known as Messia, an ancient weapon created solely for the destruction of humanity. It was a force that could only be controlled through the Demon King's power. Kagami reflected on this, questioning whether such a purpose could ever be justified. He came to understand that the Demon King's will played no part in this at all, and that Estellar was using him against his will. After a brief pause, Estellar affirmed this without hesitation. In response, Kagami resolved to act. He made it clear through his stance that he would save the Demon King together with the people of Salaria, not only as their ruler, but also as Alice's father and someone important to him. Estellar was momentarily unsettled, trying to grasp Kagami's reasoning. Observing Alice's actions up to this point, he came to the conclusion that Kagami had effectively chosen to oppose all demons. Kagami turned to Alice and gently reassured her. Estellar, however, dismissed his resolve, insisting that someone of his standing could not hope to overcome such overwhelming power. No matter how much effort he put in, the result would remain the same. Kagami ignored this completely. Fixing his gaze forward, he rushed toward Messia once more, refusing to give up. Estellar watched with disdain, viewing him as nothing more than a stubborn presence. As Kagami leapt forward to attack, Messia struck first. Though he managed to avoid a direct hit, the impact of the attack still caught him in its force, sending debris crashing down around him. Buried beneath the rubble, Kagami raised his hand again, calmly signaling for another potion. Alice, still by his side, continued to support him as he struggled back to his feet. Estellar observed this with growing disbelief, unable to understand how Kagami continued to stand after enduring repeated blows. Each time Kagami charged forward, he was struck down again, yet he continued to rise. Even so, Kagami continued to stand. Kuru watched in stunned silence, while Alice looked on with tears in her eyes. Despite enduring repeated blows, he gathered himself again, refusing to stop. Rex, too, could only watch in disbelief at how far Kagami was willing to push himself. With renewed focus, Kagami charged at Messia once more. This time, he avoided the incoming attack with precision. Taking advantage of the opening, he unleashed a series of strikes, landing blow after blow until Messia finally staggered. For the first time, Estellar showed clear surprise, while Rex recognized that Kagami's efforts were beginning to have an effect. However, the moment did not last. Messia's power surged as its eye emitted an intense glow. In an instant, it struck back with overwhelming force, sending Kagami flying once again. Alice could only watch in shock as he crashed heavily onto the ground, his body battered once more. Estellar descended to observe him more closely, beginning to question whether someone like Kagami could truly be nothing more than a villager. At the same time, Takaco and the others rushed to his side, concerned. When they tried to understand what he had been attempting, Kagami simply showed that he had only acted because he needed to try. Alice, no longer able to endure it, urged him to stop, unable to accept him pushing himself so far. Kuru shared the same concern, recognizing that continuing like this would only lead to his death. Tina added that the potions had already lost most of their effect, and from that point on, only limited healing magic remained. Even with all of this, Kagami turned his attention back toward Messia. A faint smile appeared as he looked at Alice, recalling his promise to save her father. At that moment, a soft glow surrounded his body as Palna stepped forward and used her healing magic. Even as she restored him, she struggled to understand how he could keep fighting with such unwavering resolve. Kagami briefly acknowledged her ability to heal, recognizing its value. However, Palna's expression turned serious as she demanded an explanation. She questioned why he refused to treat demons as enemies and why he continued to fight in such a reckless manner. Takaco, Kuru, Tina, and Rex all waited for his answer. When Kagami hesitated, Palna made it clear through her stance that she would stop supporting him if he did not respond. With no choice left, Kagami began to speak through his actions and expression, recalling the moment when his father had been killed by monsters. The memory remained clear to Kagami, an event that made him question why villagers like himself were so powerless. Unable to accept that weakness, he searched desperately for a way to grow stronger, eventually devoting himself entirely to increasing his level. As time passed, he earned money, his life stabilized, and he came to believe that hunting monsters was the most reliable way to survive in that world. However, as he continued, his thinking began to change. He started questioning the very structure of the world around him. He wondered why monsters dropped currency that could be used in human society, what the true meaning of classes was, and why such a large gap in strength existed between them. He also questioned the purpose of the status system, considering whether it existed only to display one's condition. When he reflected on levels, experience, and the way skills were granted at set intervals, it all began to feel artificial and without clear meaning. The others struggled to fully grasp his line of thought, but Kagami continued. He revealed that his mother had not been killed by demons or monsters, but by humans. If monsters had been responsible, he might have been able to accept it as something unavoidable. Instead, that experience led him to a different conclusion. The world was not divided simply into good humans and evil demons. There were kind demons just as there were cruel humans. Even so, that realization alone was not enough to resolve the conflict between them. As long as monsters created through demonic power continued to harm humans, resentment toward demons would remain. Kagami explained that in this world, when humans eliminated dangerous monsters, their own lives improved. Survival itself depended on defeating monsters and demons. Because people accepted this as the natural order, they never stopped to question it. Instead, they followed the path set before them, bound to the roles assigned to them without resistance. Noticing Rex's confusion, Kagami pointed out how Rex often justified his actions by relying on the idea of being a hero, as if he were trying to convince himself more than anyone else. He then turned that thought back on him, questioning whether, if given a true choice, Rex would still follow that same path or choose something different. Raising his voice, Kagami made it clear that he wanted the freedom to choose, believing that everyone should have that right. However, he acknowledged that the very rules of the world stood in the way of that freedom. As he slowly rose to his feet, he revealed what had happened when he reached level 999. At that point, he had fallen into despair. The status window no longer showed any requirement for the next level, making it clear that no matter how much he tried, he could not grow any stronger. The realization left those around him in shock. Even after reaching the highest point, he had still wanted to go further, yet an unseen force had set a limit he could not cross. Estellar paused at this, questioning why Kagami continued to fight despite knowing that limit existed. Kagami revealed that after reaching level 999, he had gained a new skill. At first, it seemed insignificant, but it only deepened the doubts that had already begun to form within him. Then, Kagami revealed his status window, drawing Estellar's full attention. The skill he possessed was one that defied the natural order, allowing his growth to continue beyond the established limits by turning accumulated experience into strength. The meaning behind it unsettled Estellar. For Kagami, this ability represented something more. It was proof of his right to challenge the system itself. Kagami declared that if there truly was a god who had created this world, then he would face that being directly and demand a world where everyone could live freely by their own choice. The weight of that resolve left Alice stunned. Estellar, now deep in thought, began to grasp the true implications of Kagami's ability. If Kagami continued fighting with such power, then the situation was far more dangerous than he had first believed. A thought began to form that Kagami might have already adapted to facing something on the level of Messia. As Kagami steadied himself once more, it became clear that potions no longer had any effect on him. Rex, Takaco, and Estellar all watched closely, anticipating what he would do next. Then, with visible strain, Kagami released a surge of power from within. The force spread outward, sending violent winds across the battlefield and lifting debris into the air. Takaco immediately moved to shield Alice as the ground and air trembled under the pressure of Kagami's unleashed strength. Estellar was left in stunned confusion as the power continued to rise. Rex, unable to fully understand what was happening, could only focus on Kagami's next move. Kagami, however, showed through his actions that this was not something he had wanted to rely on, but the situation had forced his hand. He had activated a skill that allowed him to break past his natural limits. Normally, a person could only draw out a portion of their full strength, but this ability temporarily raised that restriction. For a brief moment, Kagami's power was effectively doubled. Estellar was caught off guard by the scale of it, while Kagami remained aware of the cost. Once the effect ended, his body would be pushed to its limit, leaving him unable to move. It was a final, desperate measure. Without hesitation, Kagami rushed toward Messia, committing himself fully as the outcome would decide which of them held greater strength. As he closed the distance, the massive creature swung its arm to strike him down. This time, Kagami moved with ease, avoiding the attack without difficulty. Taking that opening, he leapt onto the creature's shoulder and propelled himself toward its head, gathering all his strength into a single, decisive strike. In that instant, Kagami rejected the limits that had been placed upon him, the boundary of level 999 and the rigid rules that governed the world. He chose to define his own limits. With that resolve, he delivered a powerful blow. The impact shattered Messia, its massive body breaking apart as the black armor cracked and collapsed to the ground. Through the falling debris, Kagami pushed forward, forcing his way through the broken remains. At last, he reached the one within. A faint smile appeared as he came face to face with the Demon King. After Messia's destruction, its shattered armor lay scattered and smoking across the battlefield. Kagami pulled the Demon King free from the wreckage. At that moment, Alice rushed toward them, drawn by the sight. The Demon King, though weakened, remained conscious and recognized her presence. Overcome with emotion, she reunited with him, unable to hold back her tears. Watching the scene unfold, Kagami quietly felt a sense of relief. With that, he allowed himself to fall back, collapsing onto the ground. Alarmed, Alice quickly turned her attention to Kagami. He showed that he could no longer move, the result of forcing his body beyond its limits. As Alice carefully tended to him, the Demon King observed the scene in silence. With the immediate danger gone, Takaco and the others took the opportunity to rest, waiting to see what would happen next. After a brief pause, the Demon King acknowledged how much time had passed and recognized that he now owed Kagami a debt. Kagami made it clear through his attitude that he did not see it that way, having acted for both the Demon King and for Alice, whom he regarded as someone close to him. The Demon King reflected on this, finding it unusual that someone like Kagami would consider a demon so important, yet noting that Kagami had always been different from others. Turning his attention to Alice, the Demon King showed regret for the distress she had endured. Alice reassured him through her actions, recognizing that it was thanks to Kagami and the others that he had been saved. Takaco accepted this acknowledgement with a calm expression, while Rex and the others remained uncertain, unsure of how to process everything. Noticing their hesitation, the Demon King shifted his focus to Rex and recognized him as a hero. The situation left Rex conflicted, caught between his role and what stood before him. Before he could settle his thoughts, Palna reacted strongly, her focus turning to whether the Demon King should be eliminated. Though she lacked the means to act immediately, her thoughts lingered on how he might respond if faced with death. The Demon King reacted calmly, accepting the possibility without resistance. This only unsettled Palna further. Before anything could escalate, Mino stepped forward and placed himself between them and the Demon King, making it clear through his stance that he would not allow any harm to come to his lord while he still stood. The tension in the air eased slightly as Alice stepped forward, placing herself in front of her father and appealing to Palna with clear emotion. For a brief moment, silence settled over them. In the end, Palna lowered her gaze and chose to walk away. Alice let out a quiet breath of relief. The Demon King then turned his attention to Mino, acknowledging his loyalty and showing pride in having such a devoted retainer. Mino responded with humility, dismissing the praise. Soon after, the Demon King shifted his focus to Estellar, seeking to understand his intentions. Estellar paused to consider before admitting that he had originally planned to use the Demon King's power to bring destruction upon humanity. However, he now doubted that he would have another chance to carry it out. Kagami reacted to this, trying to understand what he meant. Instead of answering directly, Estellar redirected his attention to Kagami. He brought up Kagami's desire to challenge the creator of the world and revealed that there were two possible ways to achieve it. This revelation surprised Kagami and drew the attention of everyone present. Estellar then explained that the first method was to kill the Demon King. The implication immediately affected those around him. Alice clung tightly to her father, shaken by the idea, while Rex reacted with disbelief. Kagami struggled to see how such an act could serve as guidance. As he thought it through, he began to connect it with Estellar's earlier actions during the attack on Salaria. The escape routes had not been completely sealed, suggesting that the chaos had been intentionally allowed to spread, feeding fear and directing hatred toward the Demon King. With that understanding, Kagami looked forward and firmly rejected the idea. He made it clear through his resolve that he would never take the Demon King's life. Estellar accepted that answer, noting that it only complicated matters further. Kagami then pressed him, questioning where he had learned of such a method. If Estellar was willing to sacrifice even his own kind for that goal, then he too was acting within the rigid structure of the world's rules. Estellar noted the irony in Kagami's words, pointing out how far he had already advanced within the very system he now questioned. When Kagami pressed him about the second method, Estellar chose to reveal it. He explained that the clue lay in an item sold within a town, an unnamed object of extreme value. Hearing this, Kagami immediately recalled the mysterious item priced at 10,000 gold. The realization struck him, and he questioned whether that was truly what Estellar meant. Seeing that Kagami understood, Estellar began to activate his magic. As Kagami reacted, Alice turned toward her father. Slowly, both the Demon King and Estellar began to fade, their forms breaking apart as they dematerialized. Watching her father disappear before her eyes, Alice was left overwhelmed. Kagami, filled with anger, directed his frustration toward Estellar, unable to accept how someone who claimed loyalty could act in such a way. Estellar showed no hesitation, viewing his role as a retainer as nothing more than fate. As his form continued to vanish, he left Kagami with a final condition. He would hold the Demon King for 1 year. If Kagami failed to meet the required conditions within that time, the Demon King's power would once again be used to bring destruction upon humanity. With that, Estellar, the Demon King, and Messia disappeared completely. In the aftermath, Alice remained in quiet despair, calling out to her father, while Mino stood frozen, struggling to process what had just occurred. Kagami moved to reassure Alice, though his thoughts had already turned toward what lay ahead. He now had only 1 year and would need to gather 10,000 gold somehow. As the group tried to come to terms with everything, Kuru looked to Kagami, wondering what they should do next. After a brief pause, Kagami scratched his head and reached a decision. To everyone's surprise, he proposed that their first step would be to open a casino, leaving the others stunned as they tried to understand what he had just suggested. At Takaco's bar in Valman, Kagami directed everyone's attention back to the matter at hand. 2 months had already passed since the incident in Salaria, leaving them with only 10 months remaining to meet Estellar's demand. To save the Demon King, they needed to obtain the mysterious item worth 10,000 gold coins. In order to gather such a large amount, they had continued their preparations, and the construction of a massive casino was now nearing completion. Kagami then pointed out a major issue. They still had not hired any staff to run the casino, and with the grand opening only 2 weeks away, they would need to address that immediately. Before he could finish, Takaco struck him on the head, clearly frustrated, and made it known that if he had taken things more seriously, the situation would not have reached this point. Kagami insisted that he had been taking it seriously. He argued that Valman was full of activity, with mercenaries, merchants, and adventurers causing constant commotion from morning until night. From his perspective, money would soon start flowing in. All that remained was to secure staff to manage the operation, though Takaco was not convinced. Takaco struck him again and scolded him further, questioning whether he understood how difficult it was to manage even a small establishment like her own. She pressed him on the details, asking who would train the staff in such a short time, how their salaries would be handled, how food supplies would be secured, and how he planned to prepare everything necessary. From behind, Tina felt uneasy, admitting that they also shared responsibility for leaving everything in Kagami's hands. She acknowledged the need for 10,000 gold and asked how much they still lacked. Kagami answered that they were short by about 5,000 gold. Rex reacted to the amount, noting that such a sum could be enough to buy something as grand as a castle. He questioned whether it was truly necessary to gather that much. He then turned to Kagami, asking what he had been doing over the past 2 months. Kagami explained that he had spent that time training in a dungeon, earning what money he could. Tina recognized the effort but pointed out that neglecting to hire staff remained a serious oversight. Kagami raised his voice slightly, emphasizing that his time had not been wasted. He revealed that during that period he had managed to create a special cloth capable of concealing Mino's magical energy. With it, Mino would now be able to move around freely as long as he wore a hat. It was an item specifically designed to disguise magical presence. Kuru stated that given their current situation, they had no choice but to give it their best effort. Tina followed, pointing out that they needed to gather a large number of staff before the casino's opening while also saving up 5,000 gold within the remaining 10 months. From her perspective, the task bordered on impossible. Kuru acknowledged that it might seem that way, but insisted that it still had to be done. Rex then expressed confidence, believing that with his reputation as a hero, things would work out, and he placed himself forward as someone they could rely on. Tina added that, on top of everything, their most dependable member was not even present. Nearby, Alice listened quietly. In her thoughts, she understood how difficult their situation was, yet she felt genuinely happy seeing humans and demons working together like this. It was something she wished she could share with her father. She remembered the events in Salaria, where Estellar had taken her father away. He had given them a 1-year deadline. Within that time, Kagami was expected to uncover the secrets of the world. If he failed, her father's power would once again be used to attack humanity. To uncover those secrets, they needed a special item, and to obtain it, they would have to gather the overwhelming sum of 10,000 gold. As the discussion continued, Tina announced that she would be leaving. She reflected on how she had originally joined to defeat the Demon King, and under the current circumstances, she felt her presence was no longer necessary. Palna then stated that she would also take her leave for the time being, and that their discussion would be put on hold until they met again. With that, she departed. Tina noted her absence, feeling that things would become a little quieter, but Kagami showed that he was not troubled by it. He then turned his attention to the others, wondering about their decisions. Takaco remained, explaining that she had stayed to continue strengthening herself. She believed that being alongside Rex and Kuru was the best path for her at the moment, and chose to leave the final decision to them. Kuru then spoke, reflecting on her upbringing. As a princess, she had lived her life within the castle walls, viewing the world through what she had been taught. However, she had come to realize that there was much more to learn by seeing things firsthand, just as Kagami had shown. Because of that, she wished to stay and assist him, asking to be allowed to help in return for being accepted there. Kagami responded with a warm expression, showing that he would rely on them moving forward. Rex then shared his own thoughts. As a hero, his focus had once been solely on defeating the Demon King, but that no longer held the same meaning for him. Like Kuru, he realized that he had not truly been living for himself. Through Kagami, he had come to understand that roles did not define everything, and that there was value in living beyond the title of a hero. With that realization, he chose to support Kagami, ready to help in whatever way he could. Kagami questioned whether someone like him, a mere villager, could truly be of help to a hero like Rex. In response, Rex held firmly to the idea that it was Kagami himself who had shown him that roles and races held no real meaning. From that point on, Rex decided to address Kagami as his master. Kagami immediately rejected the idea, making it clear through his reaction that he did not want to be called that. From a distance, Alice listened quietly. In her thoughts, she reflected on how 2 months had already passed since everything began. During that time, they had all worked together. She had never imagined that they would one day stand side by side with a hero and his companions. The path they had once almost given up on had slowly begun to open again. Rex expressed his desire to train under Kagami, believing that in return, he could support him in whatever way was needed. Kagami reacted with confusion and raised his voice slightly, unable to understand what Rex was saying, and again rejected being called master. Even so, Rex remained stubborn, continuing to address him that way and insisting on training together. Kuru stepped in, shifting the focus back to their situation. Time was running out, and they needed to act. She suggested that they head to a place where people gathered and begin hiring staff. Rex then proposed the plaza where they had previously recruited companions. Kagami agreed with the idea. He then called out to the group, addressing Alice, Kuru, Tina, and Rex, and stated that they would go to the plaza to recruit staff. Rex responded with confidence, showing that Kagami could rely on him, while Mino questioned why his name had not been included. Nearby, Takaco observed the group, commenting to herself that they were acting like fools if they believed it would be that simple. Later, at Valman Plaza, Kagami looked around at the crowd and questioned why, despite the number of people present, they had not been able to recruit anyone. Even with someone like Rex, who stood out, and Kuru, who carried herself with grace, they had not succeeded. Frustration built within him as he wondered what else was missing. He questioned what more was needed beyond having appealing people involved, and where things had gone wrong. Tina, noticing his thoughts, questioned his reasoning. Kagami reflected that even though he had prepared handouts, the situation still felt uncertain and unconvincing. A short distance away, Alice watched as Kagami struggled, realizing he had reached his limit for the moment. Nearby, a man's gaze lingered on her. As she walked, she hoped that things would somehow work out. Lost in thought, she failed to notice the person in front of her and collided with him. She quickly showed her apology, acknowledging that she had not been paying attention. The man stood before her, his presence raising a quiet sense of unease, as if he might be something more than just another passerby. The man continued staring at Alice, making her feel increasingly uneasy. After a moment, he smiled and regarded her with interest, viewing her as a gentle and delicate presence. Kagami quickly noticed the situation and called out to Alice as he moved toward her. He stepped in and confronted the man, questioning whether there was any issue. The man reacted with mild offense, presenting himself with formality and introducing himself as David Foran, a level 77 merchant. He explained that he served the royal family of the Hekisaldorian kingdom and stated that he had come with the purpose of retrieving Kuru. Kagami's expression turned cautious, and without hesitation, he raised his voice and called out for the security guild. He loudly accused the man of behaving in a suspicious and inappropriate manner, describing his actions in a way that drew immediate attention. David was caught off guard by the sudden accusation. People nearby reacted quickly, startled by the commotion. Some began to agree with Kagami's claims, commenting on the man's unsettling gaze, while others labeled his behavior as suspicious. David attempted to deny the accusations, but his voice was drowned out by the growing attention. Soon after, guards appeared behind David and instructed him to come with them to the station. He stood in shock as they escorted him away. Kagami then urged Alice to leave, but at that moment, she raised her voice and called for the guards to release the man, insisting that he had done nothing wrong. Kagami was left confused by her reaction. Alice made it clear through her expression that while she understood Kagami's intentions, she did not believe his actions had been appropriate. Her words struck Kagami more deeply than expected. At the same time, David was visibly moved by her defense. He showed appreciation for her actions, recognizing her kindness despite her young age. Alice responded with a gentle smile as he looked at her. Without saying anything further, David left, while Kagami continued to watch him. Afterward, David shifted the focus, questioning Kagami's actions and what he had been trying to achieve. Kagami admitted that his approach had been meant to place David in a difficult position. He pointed out that David had specifically stated that he had come to retrieve Kuru, which made him suspicious of his true intentions. David responded by suggesting that Kagami should not rely on baseless assumptions to justify his actions. At the same time, he acknowledged that Kagami's suspicions were not entirely unfounded, hinting that he did indeed have business that involved all of them. At that moment, someone called out to David. When he turned, he saw Kururu approaching, questioning why he was there. David acknowledged her presence immediately. With clear delight, he showed admiration upon seeing her in good health, appreciating her appearance with great enthusiasm. Hearing this, Kagami concluded that David's behavior only confirmed his earlier suspicion. Rex, however, stepped in and noted that this was not unusual, as David had acted the same way when they first met. It was simply part of his personality. Rex then approached David and recognized him, noting that it had been a long time. David responded with a polite apology for not greeting him sooner. Rex dismissed the formality and suggested that instead of continuing the conversation in the open, they should move somewhere more suitable. David agreed without hesitation. Later, inside a cafe, Kururu turned her attention back to David, asking about his purpose for coming to such a place. David acknowledged his earlier lack of formality and explained that a report had been received. According to that report, instead of continuing their journey to subjugate the Demon King, they had chosen to remain in the town. By order of the king, he had been sent to confirm whether this information was true. Kururu reacted with clear surprise at this. Rex then understood the implication, recognizing that David had come to take Kururu back. However, David clarified that unless she had truly abandoned her mission to defeat the Demon King, he had no intention of forcing her return. As a sage, that mission remained her highest responsibility. Kururu responded with firm resolve. She made it clear through her words that their goal had not changed. In order to defeat the Demon King, they were strengthening themselves while gathering the necessary funds to obtain proper equipment. This approach was based on the method Kagami had used to reach level 999. By following that path, they believed they could grow stronger than before. Because of this, they had chosen to remain in the town to train. Her purpose remained unchanged, and she intended for that message to be conveyed clearly. Nearby, Tina quietly found Kururu's explanation quite convincing. David then continued, acknowledging that reports had also reached them claiming that Kururu and Rex had been misled by a villager. Hearing this, Kagami reacted, showing interest in the mention of such reports. David explained that many adventurers had witnessed the events during the Salaria incident, and as a result, rumors had spread throughout the kingdom. Through his sources, he had gathered a considerable amount of information, including details about their current location. Kagami listened without much reaction, unimpressed. He pressed David to make his point clear without delay, wanting to understand what he was getting at. David then prepared to explain further. While it was true that he had come to retrieve the princess, that objective was only part of a larger purpose. His real mission was to continue the search for the Demon King, whose whereabouts remained unknown. According to the report, they were currently making preparations. If what Kururu had said was accurate, then there would be no issue. However, to confirm the truth of their claims, he requested permission to observe their actions for 1 month. Kagami reacted with clear discomfort, finding the idea of being monitored stressful. David then added another point. Although he found it difficult to believe, based on Kagami's performance during the Salaria incident, it seemed possible that Kagami might be capable of defeating the Demon King himself if he truly wished to. Kururu was left without a response to that implication. Kagami immediately rejected the idea, making it clear that such an assumption underestimated the weakness of a villager. He emphasized that their success had only been possible because of everyone's combined efforts, including powerful magic, healing, and timely support. Tina observed him quietly, noting how talkative he became when the situation grew tense. Kagami continued, pointing out that the opponent in Salaria had not even been the Demon King, but rather one of his subordinates. If they had faced the Demon King himself, there was no chance they would have won. Because of that, they were now focused on saving money, improving their equipment, and gathering allies. In return for helping Kururu and Rex grow stronger, they were assisting him in collecting the necessary funds. David listened carefully and showed understanding. Based on this, he concluded that they were currently attempting to recruit more companions. He then expressed his intention to help, offering his assistance in their efforts if they would allow it. Kururu showed her surprise at David's offer to help. David made it clear through his words that while he may serve as an observer, his foremost role remained that of Kururu's devoted servant. Later, at Valman Square, Takaco arrived to check on their progress. What she found surprised her. A long line of people had gathered, waiting for recruitment. The scene was far beyond what she had expected, leaving her wondering what kind of method had been used to achieve such results. She noticed David speaking with Rex and turned her attention toward them, curious about his identity. Rex, still in disbelief, tried to process what had just happened, while Tina pointed out how remarkable it was that they had managed to attract so many people when earlier they had failed to draw even a single applicant. David explained that his contribution had simply been organizing the information on the flyers. He understood that many people would feel uncertain about applying to a newly established workplace, so he had made the details clearer and easier to understand. As Rex read through the revised flyers, he recognized how well-structured and easy they were to follow. Nearby, David expressed his willingness to assist further, offering to help manage the casino as well. Kuru showed clear delight at this development. Takaco then approached and observed that things seemed to be progressing smoothly. Tina acknowledged that the success was largely due to David's efforts and noted that they would likely secure enough staff members now. David then formally introduced himself to Takaco, who observed that he appeared to be someone capable of handling responsibility. In response, she introduced herself as well, expressing her intention to work alongside him moving forward. Kagami soon approached, attempting to interrupt their conversation and refocus everyone. However, he was quickly cut off as Tina directed him to continue hunting monsters instead. Takaco agreed with that suggestion, leaving Kagami feeling set aside as the others continued their discussion. David approached Kuru with a request, expressing his intention to personally wake her each morning. Kuru immediately rejected the idea without hesitation. Nearby, Kagami observed the exchange, and Rex noticed his reaction. Rex tried to encourage him, suggesting that he should not let it bother him and that he would join him in hunting monsters once his training was complete. Kagami declined the offer, reminding him that he had responsibilities to handle, particularly maintaining the facilities. His attention then returned to David and Kuru, noting how well the two seemed to get along. Rex explained that David had been serving the royal family since before Kuru was born, making him someone almost like family to her. He then asked Kagami if something was troubling him. Kagami admitted that the situation felt unusual. The idea of being observed for an entire month seemed sudden, especially since no one had monitored them before. He questioned why David had appeared now. Rex considered the possibility that it might be connected to their decision to abandon their original quest. Kagami acknowledged that it could be related, but he still felt that something was not right. He then advised caution, particularly when it came to Alice and Mino. From a distance, David watched them, his expression appearing calm and unreadable. Meanwhile, far away in the royal capital of Hecasaldoria, within the throne room, the king reflected on the situation involving Kuru. He found it difficult to accept what he had heard. This was King Simon Hecasaldoria. He considered the reports before him, which spoke of a level 999 villager and a demon who desired peaceful coexistence. Palna confirmed the truth of these claims. She suggested that their actions might be straying from the path the king had intended and asked for his judgment on the matter. The king found it difficult to accept her words so easily. However, Palna's knowledge of the situation was too detailed to dismiss as mere falsehood. He then acknowledged her directly, confirming her identity as Palna. The king reflected on the report, realizing that someone had managed to influence Kuru, who had been raised to despise demons. He found it difficult to understand what kind of person could cause such a change, especially someone described as a mere villager. When Palna questioned the idea of being conditioned, the king clarified that Kuru had been shaped through strict and disciplined education. He then considered the possibility that his daughter had truly changed, and that the cause of it was that villager. At the same time, he questioned why Palna herself had not been affected in the same way. He wondered if her reason for bringing this information forward was driven by a desire for wealth or status. Palna dismissed that idea entirely, making it clear that such things held no value for her. As for why she remained unaffected, she revealed that everything she had witnessed felt too strange for her to fully accept or understand. When the king asked what she truly wanted, her answer came with clear intensity. She desired a world where demons did not exist. The king was taken aback by her words. Palna then clarified that her purpose in coming had been to report on the villager's condition and to ease any concerns the king might have. With that, she excused herself and left the throne room. Left alone, the king reflected quietly, sensing that Palna carried a heavy burden of her own. Outside, Palna's arm trembled uncontrollably. She gripped it tightly, trying to steady herself. The thought of humans and demons living together left her deeply unsettled. With that unease growing stronger, she reaffirmed her belief that demons must be eradicated. This marked the beginning of Palna's past, tracing back to the day she first met that young man, and what followed after. At that time, in the royal library, Palna was only 9 years old. Magic was understood to be the result of accumulated knowledge combined with creativity. Only by building knowledge and developing the body's network of magic could one properly imagine and control magical energy. Without the ability to manipulate that energy, casting magic would not be possible. With that in mind, Palna had been instructed to continue reading in order to expand her understanding as a developing magician. Because of this, she visited the library every day. One day, while she was reading, a voice nearby questioned whether she disliked books. A young boy was seated beside her. Palna turned her attention to him, curious about who he was. The boy presented himself casually, explaining through his manner that he was simply someone who had been made to come there. Palna showed little interest in his explanation. The boy then handed her a book. Through his actions, he suggested that if she did not truly enjoy reading, he would recommend the one he had given her. He also implied that libraries were not the only places where one could learn about magic. Palna opened the book and began to read. In her thoughts, she concluded that it was still just another book in the end. She considered returning it, not wanting to cause trouble for anyone. The boy questioned who she believed she might upset. He then revealed that he had no parents and lived on his own. Palna fell silent for a moment before continuing to read. From her perspective, he was someone much taller than her, someone who read constantly, always with glasses, and carried a gentle expression. That encounter marked her first meeting with him. Despite everything, she realized that she did not truly dislike the library as much as she thought. The boy held a clear desire not to remain confined within a limited world. He possessed remarkable talent. His ability to handle both knowledge and magic stood far above others. Driven by a deep curiosity, he would travel to explore anything that caught his interest. Palna often followed him during these journeys. Over time, without realizing it, she began to refer to him as her master. She came to understand that there was far more to the world than what she had learned from books alone. There were many things she still did not know. Her master seemed to understand nearly everything. He held strong ideas about how the world should be and worked toward bringing those ideas into reality. However, that same determination became both his greatest strength and his greatest weakness. One day, as they sat together on a bench, Palna found herself confused and unsettled by an idea her master brought up. He believed that if humans and demons could understand one another, life would become far richer than it currently was. Palna questioned this, thinking that even if he wished to learn more about demons, there should be safer and more practical ways to do so. However, her master saw it differently. From his perspective, true understanding would take time, and there would always be things that both sides could not immediately comprehend. Driven by his endless curiosity, her master turned his attention toward the unknown nature of demons. He believed that through fair interaction and the sharing of knowledge, the world could become more prosperous. He even gave an example to support his thinking. If demons could better control their magic, it might be possible to regulate the birth of monsters. Palna reacted strongly to this idea, recognizing the danger in it. Still, he continued to consider the possibility. If such a future were truly achievable, Palna would have tried to stop him. However, by that time, he had already taken action and begun interacting with demons. Before long, they traveled to a place where demons lived. Upon their arrival, the demons reacted with surprise, questioning why humans had come to such a place. Her master attempted to explain his intentions, aiming to establish a stable relationship. However, his words were met with immediate rejection, and the situation quickly turned hostile. They were chased and forced to flee, finding no ease in escaping. Even so, her master did not give up. He continued visiting the demon village, returning again and again without any form of protection, always bringing gifts with him. Through his actions, he expressed his desire to learn about how demons lived their lives. At first, the demons remained suspicious, unsure of what he truly intended. However, as he persisted without hesitation, their attitude toward him slowly began to change. Over time, the tension lessened, and Palna noticed that the demons were gradually warming up to him. It was something she had not expected. Then, one day, her master began to feel that the time had come. Palna did not understand what he meant at first. Soon after, he called out to those around him, preparing to speak about what he had learned from the demons. He continued, sharing what he had learned about humans, and expressed his wish to teach those ways to the demons as well. In return, he hoped to introduce them to a human village. The demons fell silent at the proposal. He assured them through his conviction that no harm would come to them. One of the demons stepped forward and quietly spoke to their chief. After a moment, the chief gave his approval. Overcome with relief, her master embraced the moment with joy, showing that he had succeeded. Palna watched with a small sense of pride, thinking that it was a good outcome for him. She felt glad that the demons had come to trust him. The place chosen for the exchange was the town where Palna had been born. Since it was difficult for demons to approach the royal capital due to strict surveillance, this village was considered more suitable. Few people there had ever seen a real demon, and compared to other places, the hostility toward them was not as severe. The demons arrived through a route that was normally impossible for them to pass because of the heavy monitoring. When her master entered the meeting place alongside them, he gestured toward Palna. However, behind him, one of the demons began to gather power in his hand. Before anything could be understood, the demon moved. In an instant, the demon struck, driving his hand straight through her master's chest. Everything fell silent. The situation shifted without warning, and no one present could react in time. Then chaos broke out. The demons turned hostile, and violence spread through the area. One of them signaled the others, and they began attacking the humans. Palna stood frozen, unable to process what was happening as she watched the slaughter unfold. She could not understand how everything had come to this. Amid the chaos, a human urged her to run. Yet she remained still, recalling her master's earlier reassurance that no harm would come. Moments later, she was carried away by a soldier, leaving her master behind. As she looked back, she saw that he was already gone. Tears followed as the weight of what had happened settled in, and the belief she had held shattered. In the present, within the royal capital, Palna sat quietly, reflecting on those events. Many years had passed since that day. She had once considered leaving it all behind and living a normal life. But then she encountered Rex and Kuru, who were determined to defeat demons and the Demon King. She refused to let that chance slip away. It was an opportunity she had finally grasped, a path toward what she had carried within her for so long. Even if the one responsible for her loss was tied to the very system of the world itself, she would not turn away. With firm resolve, she held onto her decision. She would see it through, and she would have the villager return what had been taken from her. Meanwhile, inside the training cave, Rex directed Kururu to apply strengthening enhancement magic to him. She responded immediately, casting the spell without hesitation. With his strength boosted, Rex rushed forward and struck with his fist, delivering an attack powerful enough to rival that of a martial artist. However, before he could continue, Kagami suddenly struck him from behind, knocking him off balance. Rex reacted in confusion, unable to understand why he had been interrupted. Kagami made it clear through his actions that relying on enhancement magic defeated the purpose of the training. The goal was to overcome opponents who were stronger, not to depend on external support. Rex tried to push back against this idea, but Kagami pointed out that the enemy they faced was a level 103 Berserker Mage. Rex, at level 91 and without his equipment, recognized the gap and felt that victory was impossible under such conditions. Kagami explained that fighting under unfavorable circumstances was precisely the point. Beyond the experience gained from level differences, there was also valuable growth that came from facing higher-ranked opponents. He reminded Rex that this had been explained before and emphasized that learning to fight under disadvantageous conditions was essential. Even so, he reassured him that if things became too dangerous, he would step in, allowing Rex to fight without holding back. Kururu offered to heal Rex, but he refused, choosing instead to continue on his own. With renewed determination, he charged forward once more and struck the Berserker Mage directly in the face, showing confidence in his effort. The Berserker Mage responded immediately, releasing a fire spell that struck Rex. The heat overwhelmed him, causing him to react as he endured the attack. Kagami observed and pointed out that the opponent was clearly stronger, advising that patience and caution were necessary. Rather than confronting the enemy head-on, he suggested a strategy of striking and retreating. Kuru, watching closely, questioned whether it was safe to leave Rex in such a state without healing him. Kagami turned his attention to her, noting that she still had plenty of energy. He saw this as a good opportunity for her to grow gradually as well. At that moment, David approached Kururu, entering the scene as the training continued. David observed the situation and expressed his belief that Kagami's actions were rooted in concern for Kururu's safety. As a sage, she was vulnerable if she strayed too far from her position at the rear of the group. He also pointed out that, based on Kagami's approach, this kind of training carried constant risk. Avoiding pain entirely would make it difficult to grow stronger. Kururu responded with confusion, unable to fully accept that reasoning, especially considering that Kagami was, by class, a villager and should be weaker than her. Kagami explained his stance in a simple way. Because she was a girl, he did not want to force her into situations that were too painful or frightening. Kururu was taken aback by this. At the same time, Rex reacted strongly to Kagami's words. He could not accept the difference in treatment, feeling that his own struggles were being dismissed. Kagami responded plainly, pointing out that Rex was a man, which only fueled Rex's frustration. Driven by that emotion, Rex surged forward and unleashed a series of attacks against the Berserker Mage. Through sheer determination, he managed to defeat it. Kagami observed the result with satisfaction, recognizing that Rex had improved. Despite the pain he endured, he no longer hesitated. He then reflected on the weight carried by heroes, understanding that they were bound by heavy responsibility. At the same time, he questioned whether Kururu would be able to bear such pressure. Kururu then spoke about her own progress. When she had first started her journey, she had been at level 42, and since then, she had only gained 3 levels. Kagami reacted with concern, confirming that she was still at level 45 and warning her against acting recklessly. He then mentioned that he had an idea that could help her increase her level. Kururu showed immediate interest, eager to hear more. While they were focused on this discussion, Rex was once again being overpowered by the Berserker Mage in the background. Kururu expressed her determination, showing that if she could reach level 200, she would commit herself fully. Kagami hesitated at the number, caught off guard by the scale of her goal. Kururu noticed his reaction, questioning his hesitation. Meanwhile, Rex, having been struck down again, called for assistance. Alice moved to offer him a potion, while Kururu apologized for not reacting sooner. David observed the exchange and noted that Kagami still had much to understand when it came to matters of the heart. At the same time, he recognized that Kagami's strength at such a young age had been shaped by his own experiences. Kagami brushed it aside, showing that the explanation was something for another time. In his thoughts, he reflected on how it had all begun. At first, he had fought simply to collect the money dropped by defeated monsters. David responded by suggesting that perhaps it was better to leave that story for another time. Even so, he found it reassuring that Kagami's efforts had not been driven purely by money. Because of that, he felt he could trust him with Kururu's safety. Kagami reacted, questioning whether David truly saw him as someone who had gained his strength solely for the sake of money. David dismissed the idea, making it clear that he had no reason to think that way. However, he explained that it was rare for villagers to pursue higher levels. Those who did often did so for financial gain. Unfortunately, many of them lost their lives while chasing stronger monsters. Alice, listening closely, wondered whether defeating powerful monsters truly resulted in earning large amounts of money. David confirmed that this was generally the case. He added that while rewards were not always directly tied to a monster's level, there were rare types of monsters that dropped especially large sums. Hearing this, Kagami turned his attention to Alice, considering whether she might know of a place where such rare monsters could be found. Alice apologized, admitting that she did not have that kind of knowledge. She then recalled something from her past. Once, she had come across a book in the library that described the strongest monster in the world, a being so powerful that even the Demon King's strength could not compare. The thought crossed her mind that if such a creature could be defeated, the reward it would leave behind would be unimaginable. Kagami noticed her distraction and asked what was wrong. Alice quickly dismissed it, choosing not to elaborate. Kagami then reflected that relying solely on defeating monsters would not be enough to earn everything they needed. That was the reason they had decided to open the casino. He then shifted the topic, asking about the current progress of their preparations and reminding David that the opening was only 2 days away. David reassured him that there would be no mistakes on his part. He admitted that he had some free time, which was why he had chosen to accompany them. At the same time, he acknowledged that observing them remained part of his responsibilities. Kagami recognized the cleverness in David's actions, yet he also felt a sense of appreciation. He expressed that he was grateful to have someone capable handling the workload, showing that he trusted David with the task. Kagami reflected that when he had first met David, he had truly believed him to be a dangerous individual. However, he now recognized that without David's help, they would not have been able to prepare everything in time for the opening. David dismissed the praise, turning his attention instead to Takaco. From his observation, Takaco was an exceptional individual, capable of completing tasks without relying on others and earning both respect and trust from those around him. In his view, that level of ability stood out clearly. Kagami quickly corrected him, making it clear that Takaco was actually a woman. David was visibly taken aback by this information. Kagami pointed out that it should have been obvious from her appearance, though David struggled to reconcile that with his impression. David found the idea unsettling, unable to match Takaco's presence with his expectations. Kagami noted that it would be best not to dwell on it too much, especially since Takaco would not react kindly if she heard such remarks. David then recalled several moments during their work when Takaco had come into close contact with him, touching his shoulders, his back, and even other areas in ways that felt unusual to him. Kagami interpreted this as nothing more than Takaco's way of teasing. Nearby, Alice noticed Kagami's expression and questioned what was on his mind. Kagami brushed it off, though he admitted to himself that he had begun thinking about his own future, even considering the idea of finding a partner someday. Alice responded without hesitation, showing that she saw no issue with staying by his side. Kagami, in turn, treated it lightly, suggesting that such a possibility could be considered far in the future. Kururu reacted strongly to this, unable to ignore the implication. The idea left her visibly unsettled as she questioned the situation. In the background, Rex continued calling for assistance, still recovering from the earlier training. Kagami clarified that there was no serious intention behind the remark, especially since drawing too much attention to Alice's identity could lead to suspicion. Kururu, however, remained concerned, pointing out the significant difference in age that would exist in such a scenario. She also felt that Kagami should not undervalue himself. With strong conviction, Kururu made it clear that she would not accept such a situation. Alice, on the other hand, showed no concern, remaining unbothered by the idea. Kururu continued to object, holding firmly to her stance. After some time passed, Rex finally expressed relief, showing how exhausted he had become. He reflected on the training and recognized how overwhelming it had been, realizing that without Kagami's guidance, he might not have made it through. Kagami reflected that most of the effort in the battle had come from Kururu. Hearing this, Kururu lowered her gaze and felt apologetic. Alice expressed that if she had the ability to use healing magic, she would have helped heal everyone herself. Rex reassured her, reminding her that she had always supported him by providing potions. Even so, Alice felt that in moments like this, she was unable to protect anyone, and that realization weighed on her. Rex acknowledged her feelings, believing that her intentions alone already held value, and he felt grateful for her presence. Kagami then turned his attention to Rex and asked about the experience he had gained from the battle. As Rex checked his status, he was visibly surprised by the amount he had accumulated. Kagami noted that the gain was significant and pointed out that facing the threat of death played an important role in that outcome. Rex understood this as he reflected on it. Kagami went on to explain that this was how Rex had managed to reach such a high level at a young age. In his own case, his progress had been supported by his self-recovery skill. He added that Rex, having Kuru by his side, could rely on her healing, and that it would be unwise to fight strong enemies without her support. Without that assistance, growth would not be as efficient, and risking death at this stage would make everything meaningless. Rex became curious and wondered when Kagami had obtained his self-recovery ability. Kagami explained that it had been his first skill, acquired upon reaching level 100. Rex found the idea appealing, wishing he could obtain a similar ability. Kagami thought it unlikely, recalling that even Estellar had described it as an extremely rare case. He added that villagers were known for acquiring unusual skills, which made his situation an exception. Rex then reflected on everything he had learned so far. He recognized that Kagami possessed a self-recovery skill, a skill that allowed him to surpass physical limits, and another that enabled him to grow beyond natural growth restrictions. These were the three abilities Kagami had already revealed. Rex realized that Kagami should still have several other skills and became eager to know more. Kagami admitted that he had not intended to keep them hidden for so long, but they were not something he would normally share. Rex understood but still felt the need to know. Kagami hesitated, reflecting on the nature of the abilities he had obtained, and questioned whether Rex truly wished to learn about them.